a world that walks the line. There's a rare few who think outside the box together for the crew. To break the equations, not bound to any rule. Exposing to the world the universe's own view. It takes the talent of the craftsman, it takes the mind of the fool, to make the vision realize energy and matter in a duel. To a break, to a duel. The old man Bills was running through his head. Cheryl probably got it hiding under his bed. Penny up to Annie making power for days. Don't listen to a word that the straight no says. Mike building batteries that power a ship. Victor comes and talking math, that's the water spiral dip. Sean chucking plasma volts a mile long. Sheila on the video making tone chuck the prongs. Burning breaking matter, they said it couldn't be done. And to all the people in the chat, I know you're having fun. So it's time to spend your Saturday with the doping old man Bills.
Hello everybody and welcome. My name is Nathan, otherwise known as Old Man Bills. What's up, Joe?
What's going on, Nathan? What's going on, everybody? TGIF.
Right on, man. Joe, we got some fun stuff to get into, man. Fusion, it's easy. So explain it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we came up with this one on one of Ashton's recent post, and I love to give credit where credit's due, because I don't maybe watch him as much as some other people do, or whatever have you, but I will admit that he has a knack for being able to find kind of like older references and resources of people that were doing stuff kind of all along, and then being able to connect it to some of the technology and the physics that we see today, and really, really good at that. And the other day, I guess I saw him have more or less like a seminar presentation from the looked like the late 90s. And it was this guy who basically said that fusion is actually pretty damn easy, and realistically, the fundamentals, the things that you need to bring together in order to have a fusion reaction that's, better than what we generally have today is, very few things. And that when they rediscovered this, and they brought it to the attention of the government agencies in order to get funding and grants, right? More or less the feedback that they got on this was, well, this is wonderful and all, but this isn't a project. We want a project. This already works. It's too easy to be done, and it's not too cheap. So it's too easy and too cheap, and the idea was kind of put off because of that, because they were afraid of losing funding for fusion research.
I don't know about that, man. I watched the same video you did, Joe, and I came away from it totally different. So, in all fairness, man, we'll take a look.
Yeah, we'll take a look.
Let's see, of course.
Yeah, and there were the original live that he put up. I couldn't find it, but it looks like he had broken it up into segments and put it as videos. So not all those videos that I sent you, they're not complete,
Oh, I understand. I can look at the structure and tell you exactly what he was doing. So give me a second. I'm just looking for a certain thing. This right here.
Right, but that's not all he was doing. I mean, that was just one example.
Okay, well, let's start with this. This is where they started.
Sure. So apparently one of the problems that they have with air breathing fusion reactions is that when you start to scale it, there starts to become inherent instabilities, right? And he's actually not the first person I've heard to say that. That's actually been said by a couple people that are doing fusion reactions that are of proper geometry, right? Because that's what this really came down to, is the geometry of this is correct, right? You want to be able to form a toroidal sphere, not a donut. So right, and that's kind of what we've been saying all along. And when it comes to this configuration, this was a small example of just one of the ways that they use to stabilize the um, the it getting scaled up, was to have just uh, a little bit of external magnetic compression. Now, the reason that they were saying that is because the magnetic compression that it could form under when it's small scale, right? As it starts to expand, the expanse of the plasma will grow faster than that of its magnetic field. Okay. And there's a power need, right? That then has to increase, okay, in order to then have that magnetic field be strong enough for the self-containment. So by utilizing just a simple array of, I guess they were off-put magnets, they were able to introduce the simulated spin and compression.
Okay, so they basically took an anode and cathode, threw it in the center of this thing, created a ball of energy, and then used the magnetic field to pinch it into place.
More or less. And, just like anything else, the way that we do things is definitely inherently different, right? But even we haven't really been bringing it up in scale either, right? To really know what sort of issues might lie ahead with that or not, potentially, or if we have alternative ways of getting over that when it comes to RAV. Okay, but they're saying that in their experiments, at least, they were experiencing those instabilities. And they also had a couple of different configurations. Some of them were using water as well, both, to actually act as like an electron delivery, and it was kind of interesting and cooling, because evidently, once it starts to expand and contract significantly, it starts to come into contact with the material of what you're, using, which is why in our instance, clay and rock and stuff like that is so great. But they were using more susceptible materials, and it was leading to material failures.
Okay, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you this right now: a magnet is basically energy over time. So at some point, magnets give out, and you only get so much value out of them for so long. Even if you create an electromagnet, then you get into the cost effect of the electromagnet, and just running it would set your project under infusion because it costs too much to run the magnets. They're too powerful. So you run an overrun right away before you even got fusion really started.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that entirely. I mean, I think that there's elements of it that might, you know, like for instance, you don't necessarily need massive external magnetic compression. You know, all you need is it to be alternating in the same way that's going to entice the spin, because the spin leads to the stability and therefore also the compression. So there's a multiplying factor that occurs, when you introduce multiple magnetic fields in. So if you have you need multiple magnetic fields regardless. So you might as well have them running it properly and situated with the polarities correct, to allow for the optimization of what's already occurring in the structured plasma.
Yeah, but when you have too much magnetic fields going on, you create distortion and noise. What's going on
Yeah.
there. One of the special things about the RAV is the frequencies themselves are in resonance, so there's no noise in it. But when you artificially put a magnetic field on something, you put noise into it. So what does that do? That breaks the coherence of the actual resonance. And as soon as you do that, you basically run into a free fall situation. You no longer have the protective layer of the resonance. You are now working on the protective layer of the magnet. So
Yep.
you're no longer running it the correct way, you devalue your situation immediately because you went for brute force instead of high coupling. And that's exactly what goes wrong immediately. You you put in stuff like a neodymium magnet, and then as soon as you do, you decouple your fields.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
the way to get them faster is to make the coupling work better to get the laminar flow to move faster in order for the fields to go in counter directions in order to get the energy out. This seems like a loss. I'll be honest with you. This I'd throw in the trash. It may create a ball in the center. I have no doubt about that.
Well,
And it may
yeah.
hold
I
it
mean,
for a few
again,
minutes.
I think that this was the proof that the scale, of it was insignificant, and that was sort of the idea behind even displaying it in this way, because the way that it had been approached previously and was and is still being approached, is in massive reactors that cost hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, that fail all the time and etc. And the ironic thing is that once that guy that was talking in that video kind of got to his summation, like the whole point was because this got sort of, had the can kicked down the road, wasn't going to get funding, you know, he then knew what it was that they wanted to get funded. And that's when he came across, tokamak, which he says that that had been basically given to them by the Russians. He started down that path, knowing that that project would get funding, but after going down that road, he realizes that the reason that the Russians would have led us down that path in the first place was probably because they knew that we'd just be throwing money and effort at it; it would never work.
No, it's a
You
waste
know,
of time.
it's a total waste of time, right? So, and we all knew that and agreed. I mean, as soon as I saw what that was doing, I was like, this is force magnetism, force compression, force geometry, diffuse state. It's in a rotational state, but it's in a rotational state of chase, meaning that there's because of how it compresses and moves in that particular geometry, there has to be a diffusion of the energy potential where the high energy potential is in the front, whatever that may be, and that's just sort of pushing the back along, which is less diffuse. That in itself leads to massive plasma instabilities, as we've seen in our own experimentation. Whenever you get a nice plasma ball and then it gets a nasty instability and the thing just collapses, starts spitting crap out, like literal throwing globules and such out of the side, that's total collapse of laminosity, efficiency, and failure. And when you're talking about having the plasma be launched off in an uncompressed but high energy state like that inside of a confined material area, you're gonna have huge losses to your equipment. So it's just like there's nothing right about how they go about that, which is
Well,
why I was so amazed when I first saw the rat.
okay, look, I'm going to be honest with you. Something like this thing is trash. Okay, I'm just going to be very honest about it. You using magnetism means you have no idea what the electromagnetic field is, and you continue to fuck it up by continuing to put it in these magnets. They have no idea how to control it or what it does or what instabilities come from it. The problem is they don't account for everything. They have horrifyingly bad accounting when it comes to electrical fields in general. Okay, they say, "Oh my God, all of a sudden we have a bunch of radiation." No, the radiation's been there the entire time. You put it off as a rounding error in the beginning. Now it showed up again. You have bad accounting. You suck
Yep.
at it. It's the same thing when you go, "Oh my God, we have entropy." Where was entropy in the beginning? It was still there. It was on such a small level that you use it as a rounding error. What
Right.
happens? It comes up later in your system and it creates an instability you weren't planning for because you put it off as a rounding error. This is a screw up in science, okay? using magnets when you need to understand the magnetodielectric effect, dude, you just shouldn't do it. Okay.
Mhm.
And the people that start to build these things, I just look at them like, you got to be a complete moron to not understand this. If you don't understand the frequency effect yet, you should quit. Take your thing,
Mhm.
hit the time clock, and just get out. Okay? The reason the RAV is so special is because of the magnetodielectric effect. It contains it at all costs. When it gets higher, it contains it. Why is it not containing it at certain points and it blasts out? It's simple. You broke the frequency zone. There are certain
Absolutely.
zones. Okay, you're breaking the frequency zone. So there's certain zones that it can work in. There's certain ones that it cannot. As soon as you go to
Mhm.
one it cannot, it bursts out. As soon as you put it in the one it does, you can have a higher volume of energy inside there as long as you understand those zones. Okay, they're all. Let me take this off of here so people can understand this. The reason this works, okay, is the same reason we had a problem with the RAV when you and Sean said that all the fields go like this in 3 circles. Okay, because they don't. They go in one circle one way, one circle to correct it, then the next
Mhm.
one again tries to correct it. Okay,
Mhm.
that's what goes on here. Why are they that way? It comes to an understanding of Floyd's suite. When you have wire wrapped this way and wire wrapped this way, it's a high voltage, okay, high amp field. And what are you doing? You're taking the flux of the magnetic field and moving it from one side to the other. That's what
Mhm.
you're doing. So imagine this is a football goalpost. 2 posts coming up, goes down to one in the center, and then there's a little pad that goes around it, right? That little pad is what you're going to create magnetic fields in. It goes back and forth, back and forth. This is AC. Okay, this is how that slosh works.
Mhm.
That's that magnetic field pushing back and forth. That's how you pull the power out of these things. That's understanding what you're dealing with. This stuff right here is, let's put high magnetic fields in it. Let's ruin the resonance completely and let's destroy the field. Okay. So it looks like a pretty bright show, but it's total garbage.
So check this out. First of all, I agree with everything that you just said. And if, by the way, if you think that I just think it moves in a figure eight and that's what it does, I mean, that's one way of visualizing some of the energy exchanges. However, um, I certainly understand that there's greater dimensional geometry to actually what's going on. It's not just some flat and exchange on a plane or something like that, to be clear. But to digress, what you said is actually really interesting because not this guy, but there was another. I wish I could recall the name of the project, but I had shared with you at least recently another person that was um, achieving discount fusion. Okay. And when they went into their configuration, it was an anode cathode configuration, linear, okay, with no sort of intermedium or structuring like we do. Okay. What they did was kind of interesting though. Okay. They forwent the resistance, okay, that is the mechanism of the asymmetric exchange as being the mechanism of what allows the RAV to start forming a magnetic component and ultimately form, right? They forwent that process and instead developed a multi-frequency anode, okay? And basically what it did was it shot higher voltage on the outside, okay, of this chamber, all right, and shot a little bit lower voltage in the center. And what that did was the same exact sort of thing that our process ultimately achieves. Okay. It's because of the difference and the change in the frequency, okay, that leads to a compression state of the center. It gets boxed in, because of the difference in the voltage and the frequency.
Yeah, but
So
every
hold on.
time you
So,
keep adding more stuff, it ruins it.
well, hold on. So what ends up happening is as it goes down and it's traveling, okay, it's creating torsion. The torsion and the offset of the difference in how it's traveling, okay, actually starts to rotate the ball, which then creates the magnetic component, the same as it does with us. And then, Lord and behold, your plasma reaction, it forms a ball and starts to fuse. And they started off with using nothing but electrodes and water initially in their initial experimentation. And as they got funding for it, they moved to deuterium. And then, once they introduced the deuterium into the equation, okay, all of the magnetic components, everything, all the structuring, everything that was occurring was amplified, by orders of magnitude. So the reaction was more efficient, lasting longer, more powerful in output. And what it was doing was also producing out of that reaction tritium. And then the tritium would be refed directly into the system to act as more fuel, like electron fuel. So it was, really, really interesting how they took a lot of the same principles and fundamentals, and, is sort of, rather than rely on the self-organization, they took the self-organization conditions and exaggerated them, to form the ball. And that's what they did. And apparently they could make one of these machines for between $1 and $5 million, depending on what configuration you want. And they are more efficient than a tokamak.
Well, anything's more efficient than that.
Well, right.
Did they reach
I'm
over?
just saying,
Did they reach over Unity on it?
No, I don't think that they did. And frankly, I don't, we've discussed it before. What actually is over Unity? Putting up higher numbers than you put in, because we know that that's not over Unity.
Well, over Unity is basically you got to do a good accounting for whatever energy you put into it, all systems included. And you have to be able to, yes, put in less energy than what you get out. And none of these ever have done that. They've all violated the rule. And then in water, it's sound.
Mm-hmm.
Sound makes a bubble that creates a prism for light.
Yep.
Is what's going on. And in that, you get this ball. And what happens is the rotation of the sphere itself will create an exclusion zone and won't allow the water near it. Okay? It'll create a reaction because in any water, as soon as you ionize it, you can change the principles of the water. You can break the H2O factor and then add whatever you want to it and recombine it. Okay?
Yeah.
That's pretty simple physics at this point.
Well, but, I have a different way of thinking about it, which is interesting because
you can't create the RAV the same way like that.
No,
it's not the same effect at all. No, you're immediately saying, hold on, but you're immediately saying as soon as you create the fusion, you're no longer creating a RAV. You're creating something different, which is fine if it gets you to the end goal, if fusion's your goal. But if it's not a RAV at all.
Well, I don't know. That's a complicated question because I think that the RAV
Not really.
I think that the RAV is capable of fusion, and I think that it already is having very micro fusion events. Not enough at all, to claim that that's the constant reaction. But I think that it does have moments of fusion events that occur just because of the torsion boundaries, how it all stays separate, and how it's all moving at slightly different speeds in coherence with each other. Now, things do break through those shear layers, and when they do, that collision would lead to a fusion event. And when you see a bright flash come out of the RAV, in my opinion, that's probably what you're observing when you see a bright flash. And yeah, with the water cavitation, like you just said, though, it's sort of interesting. I look at it, and I know that how you just said it is how we sort of accept it. And I'm not saying you're wrong, but if you think about it, and you think about what I've been saying all along about the relationship of energy and matter, the dimensionality of it as well. Okay. And I think water is the easy example to kind of get your head around it, because then air becomes way more complicated for your brain to conceive it. But in water, where it's a very clear liquid medium, you know that that liquid is taking up the entirety of that area, so to speak. So what happens when you push the water out, right? What's inside of it? Well, the answer is really nothing. But now you just created a dynamic that exists, okay? And what's that dynamic? Okay, that void is superconductive. It's no resistance. If you take into consideration what I've said previously about how I believe that the mechanism of pretty much gravity, time, etc., entropy, the nine, is an energy exchange between fifth and fourth dimensional energy, okay, entering into and reacting with 3D matter in 3D space. Okay, so when you open up this area with no resistance, but the entire other area surrounding it is flooded in dense matter, well, that energy exchange rate all of a sudden just changed significantly, because now there's no resistance. So now the pure energy is able, okay, to actually come in, leach in, to that void. And then when it collapses, there's a large energy release here, because when it closes, there's energy that's trapped, but it's no longer contained in the vacuum. So that's what I'm saying about it. So I don't know. I just think it's an interesting way to look at it. If you, start thinking about it as a little bit of a thought experiment, but.
Okay. Let me see if I can't find the picture for you. So let's see. Of course, it's not available right there. Starting to really dislike this StreamYard thing, to be very honest with you. Starting to really piss me
Changing
off.
it all the time, making things complicated to find and click around in.
Yeah. Okay. So this right here, I just want everybody to understand why you would use water. Okay. This is the RAV. You see it on the upper portion of it. The lower left side on the picture on the right is what you really need to look at. You see how there's a beam of light going right to it? It found something in a zone, and then it creates a condition around it, okay? You see it. It creates a sphere. Now, we would say, that's just light. That's how it works. You know what I mean? It's creating a photon. What's really going on there? It's more than that. It's energy that's light that's going into making a spherical structure inside of it that's creating the condition in the environment. So it's like taking space and then putting this to an asteroid, and it creates a condition for a solar system to form where that right now becomes a sun. Okay? That's what's going on here. So that's exactly what they're looking for when they put it in water. That's the effect. Now, you're going to have to understand something about this, and I'll stop sharing this. The sun is not over unity. And this is the problem they run into when they get into fusion. They continuously think it is. It's energy borrowed over time. It is not over unity. If it was over unity, we'd just create a sun in every craft that we have, and fuck it, man, we already have it. We don't need 0 point. We have over unity in the sun. It's not that hard to create a plasma event that looks like the sun. It really isn't. What is it? It's the time dilation field that's inside the sun that makes it special. It's so slow that over billions of years, we don't notice that it's an explosion happening. That's the problem. It's fusion on a time dilation scale.
Mhm.
In the beginning, it was not over unity. In the middle, it is over unity. And then it'll go back out of unity at the end. It'll start to grow, it'll become a giant, and then it'll collapse back into a dwarf star or something like that, and then create a black hole event because it's missing mass. That's what's
Right.
going on. So,
Well, the other thing too is that as what you're saying is playing out, that massive time dilation, okay, also is directly linked, to huge gravitation, which makes realistically the sun or anything with that level of gravitation, it makes it a literal magnet, for mass accumulation. It becomes a mass accumulator.
right.
So it ends up growing and growing and growing. And it's like I said to you when we were kind of just loosely discussing the subject earlier, it becomes interesting because if you bring it back down to the relationship between the matter and the energy in a proportion, right? Well, if the matter gets to a certain point where the ratio is no longer in play and the script is flipped, well, now it's in a state of decomposition, because the matter is winning over the energy, and that's sort of
Okay, but we're in an expansion phase of an explosion, is what we are right now. Okay? That's why it's creating the helium. That's why it's creating other elements out of it. We are in the expansion phase of it. That means that planets will still go further out every single time. They keep moving further and further away from the sun because we're in the explosion side of it. So, what is the key factor here? We want to capture the energy at the point that it's exploding, okay, where it has the most energy humanly possible at that point in time. Then, when it dissipates, we no longer collect it. We shut the valve off to stop collecting it. That's why 2 revs is so important. It's bouncing back and forth. It's a continuous explosion event between one and the other. You're creating a mass force in one, then you're shifting the flux to the other side and creating a mass force in the other, but you're doing it where it goes out of the realm of the rev, where it goes into the air. Then you capture it. But that's the whole point of time dilation, though. If you do not understand the sun as time dilation, you fail in the experiment. Every single
absolutely agree.
fusion, every
Yep.
single fusion one does not understand that. As soon as they go and put magnets in it, they failed to understand the experiment properly. You must create time dilation. Time dilation is only created by frequency. It's created because of the fields go rotational, 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 okay, and rotational.
Mhm.
That's the only way you get time dilation. That means that you're slowing down the effect of the explosion so that you can pull more energy out at that point in time. You do not get a good effect when you just continuously hold energy in one spot. You do not have enough energy to pour into it. You need the explosion event. In holding the stuff in one spot with magnets, you automatically fail. It's a massive failure right off the bat. You didn't understand it. You didn't understand the explosion over time. You didn't know to slow down the reaction to pull the energy out in that point in time. This is Floyd's suite, okay? It is simple. Boom, 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 creating AC going in a flux of magnetism. Okay.
So let me ask you this. What does that mean for how science currently ages the universe, right? Because what this ultimately means,
They're
okay,
wrong.
well, not only are they wrong, but why are they wrong? Well, I mean, I have a proposition, you know, take it if you will, but if it all has to do with density, energy and matter density levels, right? We know that per entropy, right? It's always going to go like low to high, right? And the way that it ends up working is that the time as we currently experience it and currently measure it, right, could have been, much slower or faster back as per our perception back then, and things just keep going faster and faster as we go along. So all the first events may well have, taken a very long time, but then it just gets pushed faster and faster and faster and faster. See? So it's like, how do you work out that equation to actually get an accurate, as we perceive it and measure it on planet Earth time? Like the universe doesn't work on our clock because it's not subject to it might be subject to the same rules, but it's not all experienced the same because it's all relative.
Okay,
You
so
know?
I know why. The speed of light is determined based on the sun. Okay, the sun's output determines the speed of light. It creates the condition, it creates the center of everything. And as soon as it does that, it sets a speed limit in that particular area. So every solar system has its own speed limit based on their sun. That's
Mhm.
what physics is missing. They think they're all the same. It's not. It's all dependent on the size of the sun and what it's doing and the speed that light puts out, which is not really the speed of light. It's how fast you can energize the next field around it is really what it is, because things don't build out in little waves that wiggle like this. That's a bunch of horse shit. Okay, you build out a sphere, it builds out another one out from it and another one out from it, keeps building sheath zones, and every time you energize it, the sheath zones will actually glow until it hits another object, and as soon as it hits that other object, that glows. Okay, that's a
Mhm.
photon when it does it. But it's not this fucking wiggly wave like this, like everybody thinks. That's fucking asinine. It's
Well,
spheres that go into sheath zones, with the sheath zones amplify the energy because that's where all the energy is. And that's where the state of energy is, because there's positive and negative in there together. So what does it do? It makes it brighter. It gives it more energy. That's how it's working. We're literally on Earth sitting in one of the sheath zones that goes around the sun. That's what we are. That's where every planet is, on
that's
every sheath
absolutely,
zone.
yeah, that's absolutely correct. And a good way of visualizing that is an example that I gave quite a while back about this experience that I had when I was sitting on a wiggly rock that was partially in the water on a very, very calm day. And, like I inadvertently had just like kind of pressed the rock and it made a wave, that I saw. And I was like, oh, this is cool. I want to see something. So I just started to rock back and forth at the same rate, and it was putting it out and putting it out and putting it out. And then, as I had said, it actually took rocks that were under the surface, okay, of the water, and then it would start to create resonance with these certain nodal points under the surface. That's because the wave is not just this, and it works in layers. You see, we observe it at the surface, and it's most apparent at the surface like that. Okay, but there's something going on above and below the surface of the water. And what's ending up happening is the wave pattern is actually tied to and repeating underneath the initial wave that you're observing, but at a slightly different rate and amplitude. Okay, and then so on, and then so on, until it becomes so nominal that it ceases any further. But when you start to scale it the way that it goes, well, that would be a sphere. And just like anything else, when you create a difference in the geometry and it's in a state of propagation, even if it's two different mediums, like for instance, the surface of water that has ripples and waves going, and then the air, okay, it's actually having that same effect on the air above it as well, that would follow the same exact rules.
Okay, I don't think that the water in the pond works the same as the spheres around the planet. Okay,
Why they why they
it's
build out?
creating the traditional wave like this in the water. Okay, but not on the outside of the planet. That's energy zoning. Okay, it's coupling. This is moving waves as a traditional fashion, where the viscosity of the water itself slows everything down because it's different than the viscosity of the air.
It's not. It's actually the disturbance that's the mechanism of the wave, because you could still create a wave in a liquid medium in a vacuum. It's the resistance, the surface resistance would be different, but that's only a resistance equation. It has nothing to do with whether or not it's there and what it's doing. As far as what I was just saying about how it builds out in layers, right? So if you were to take that same exact situation, but rather than me be at the edge of the water, instead I'm surrounded by water on the same exact situation, right? And each clack would put out a 360-degree pulse wave,
I
you
agree
know,
with that. It's a
right?
physical wave, though.
And underneath of that wave is another wave, okay,
Right?
and another wave and another wave. And the way that it would end up working out is that there would be a diminishment of the frequency and amplitude
Right.
each layer deeper you go. Well, what happens when
I
you
agreed with all that.
right. So what happens when you diminish, if you were to draw that out, okay? Well, if you were to draw it out, you'd realize it's building rings out. It's building zones out. It's just flipped. So your brain's not seeing it that way. But if you flipped it sideways, that's exactly what it's doing. But it's all from the central point. You see? So you have to be able to flip it and bring it up dimensionally to realize, oh, okay, yeah, no, that's exactly what's happening. Because once you draw that around 360 degrees and you just turn it, you turn it on its side, well, then that's what you have. You turn it 90 degrees and that's what you got.
Okay. I think there's more to go on in a wave than what's going on in what we're talking about, though. I see them as different.
Mm.
Okay.
But neither here nor there. I mean, I think we kind of got off of it a little bit, but I just think that do I think that the RAV is a fusion device? Well, not in its current configuration. That's not what it's doing efficiently, at least in any regard. But do I think that configuration, that the mechanism, okay, that drives the RAV and what makes it what it is capable of fusion? My answer to that is I believe it is.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Well, creating the double wrap told you it already. As soon as it was created and it used the same cathode, then it was already done.
mhm.
I mean, look, you're basically creating an explosion out of plasma to pull energy out. That's easy at that point. If you got it going back and forth like AC, that's kind of the point, isn't it? You basically fill up a magnetic core and it continues to fill and flux goes back and forth. It creates an AC value out of it. That's exactly what you're looking for. Okay. Now they'll burst, they'll explode, then they'll implode. They'll suck the energy back in. They're creating a vacuum when they do that, and then they continue to do this in and out. They're pushing it out and creating a vacuum. So you could just put the wire basically through a magnetic core and saturate that core immediately. But that's like I
Well,
said, it's the same thing as Floyd Sweet. It's all depending on how you want to pull the energy out. It's why all you need is basic oscillation and the understanding of how AC actually works and saturating the core of a field, then you have it. But they don't know that. They're apparently missing that part. They think that you can create this pretty light bulb and not expect to run the energy bill up. And no matter how many millions you throw at it, it still won't work. And if you want to create more energy with the water and things like that, then you have to do it through sound. That you have to use the right medium for the right thing that you're building. You know what I mean?
mhm.
Otherwise, you're in trouble. But they all will collide. That's why we have light that comes out and creates that effect where it creates that zone that's around it and stuff, right? Because it acts like it's in the water and it creates a sound in order to make things spherical. Then it basically creates a prism inside of it for light. And then the light comes out, right? As it spins, anything that spins that has energy creates a magnetic field around it. It's that simple. It comes out and it'll keep building out and building out. What we fail to understand, and I still don't understand this, it really pisses me off talking to people. There's more than one type of fucking magnetism. And because you don't
Mhm.
realize that, you fuck up everything. And then you
That is
screw up
true.
the understanding of everything. Okay.
Yep,
And
that is true.
I'll say it this simple. Okay. Replace your iron with aluminum. Check the field. Get better meters in there to look at it properly. It seems like it's not a whole lot of energy. But what happens to the capacitor? It still feels it. It knows its energy when you don't. Go ahead and take another metal. Okay. I don't know. Find the other one like silver. Okay. That's a different metal. It's going to put off a different energy signature, but it'll still fill a capacitor. What is your problem in understanding this? Is that the earth itself has all of the metals inside of it, and all of the energy goes through every single one of those pieces of metal and creates a secondary and third, fourth, fifth, up into the 20s and 30s different magnetic fields that are going on all around you at all times. So,
Hmm.
right now, we are not dominated by the field that is done in iron. You have to realize that. You can't go outside and throw an iron magnet out there and it go floating. Okay, we're not in that field.
Nope. No, we're
It's
not.
dominated by something else, and that's what you're not understanding. It frustrates the living daylights out of me. Oh, we could just flip an equation. No, you can't, because your equations are wrong in the beginning. You have bad accounting from day one. From day one. As soon as you knew that the sun was emergent and that it was an explosion, you should have realized that everything, including gravity, became emergent. The time, the gravity became emergent. All of it at that same time. It is not set in stone. For those of you who think about it, go drop some apples on top of your head. Go take two balls and swing them and drop them. Okay? You are in the wrong. You're dealing with 19th century physics that is just wrong. Okay? Fix it in your head. We have different magnetic fields going on. That's why you do not understand the capacitor that we're sitting in, because we are basically in a giant capacitor that is filled with every type of energy, and you only understand one. That's the whole crisis going on. And number two, there's so much energy there, you couldn't hope to put out your field bigger than the energy. And you go, hold on, this one gets me all the time. My magnet's field is stronger than gravity. No, it isn't, you jackass. Okay? You are in the wrong locality. Let's move you towards the core of the planet. What happens? Your magnet couldn't wipe your ass compared to the gravity going on in there. Okay? You would be crushed like a little worm, just like that, because you're not looking at it. That amount of energy from the center core of our planet has to extend all the way past the moon. Okay, in order to do that, it is magnitudes more in strength than your little fucking magnet. Okay, it's the locality that you're in, it's the field that you're in that's different. You're comparing apples to oranges, and you should not do that. Okay, that's the problem.
I mean, honestly, I agree with everything that you just said, and you almost hung me up for a second when you said that gravity um was stronger than magnetism, but you make a good point because it's relativistic, you know,
Depends on where you
and
are.
right, it's relativistic, and your magnet does not get stronger based on the gravity, you know. So because there would be no um gradient of the magnetism, that something that a magnet could pick up at the surface, let's say that it's got a maximum load rating of 100 pounds or something, or it could pick up 100 pounds on the surface. Cool. Like you said, and I agree with you. You bring that down in closer to the center point of the gravity, where the greatest coalescence is, the greatest pull, the highest mass pressure, right, exist, and the energy gradients create such high gravity in that case that 100 pounds may well weigh 1,000, but your magnet still will only pick up the 100. So what then? Like there's a point on that chart where those lines cross. So if you're looking, as far as on the planet is concerned, or in the atmosphere, or in space, magnets are greater than magnetism under those circumstances. But are they on Saturn or Jupiter?
Well,
Like
hold
are
on.
they
I
there?
don't even agree with them on the surface of the Earth, and I'll tell you why. Because you're grading the magnetic field based on iron. You're not grading it based on the energy field that's around you. They're apples and oranges. They don't even have the same field going around them. It's
No,
like,
okay.
so you say, yeah, I got an electret in one hand and I got a magnet in the other, right? Both put out the same value if you put them into energy and get them into frequency and, you know what I mean? Things like that, right? But they're not the same. One field seems weaker in the electret than it does in the magnetism, right? But they could be putting the same value to a capacitor.
Mhm.
That's the problem. We're in a giant freaking capacitor. You have to understand which energy you're creating in order to understand why you think that way. You're not thinking the correct way when you say, I have an iron boron magnet and it's stronger than gravity. No, it's in a displacement from gravity. It's not in the same field as the gravity. Therefore,
Mhm.
you cannot equalize the two together.
Not
It
only not
never
the
can
same
happen.
field, but it's not in the same location in the field. And that's one thing that I've kind of brought to light several times, where you are relative to the field is significant, because that actually tells you what the magnetic properties are, where you are. So when you take off from Earth and you look at, you know, us from thousands of miles away, and you were to sit there and imagine that magnetosphere, uh, chart, our relationship with the sun that creates that magnetosphere, right? I mean, those are the outer reaches of our magnetic field as a planet. So, what that really indicates is that when you're on the surface, okay, you're in the upper but inner layers, okay, of that magnetic field. Now, also, you could see this because what do we know that we have in like the mantle, for instance, or what do we observe when we look up at the sky? Well, we observe, here weather, and the weather patterns are based on these eddy currents that are occurring, and that's an inner geometry of magnetism. And that's also what you see in the mantle, where you see huge convection currents occurring. And it's observable, and it's all relative, because if you were on the outside of the field subject to it, right, which is how the common mind thinks about magnetism, is I have this magnet, I have that magnet, north and south, well, like this, and the opposites, they don't. And this is magnetism because this is what I learned in the second grade. Oh, okay. I mean, there's a lot of different types of magnetism, like you said. There's magnetic components. Okay. And what is a magnetic component, in my opinion? Well, it's when you have a magnetic rotational vector. Okay. But the dimensionality isn't all there. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, that means that it has a magnetic potential. Okay,
Oh,
so a
hold on.
magnetic.
You're saying the fields aren't there at all times?
Well, it depends on what and what's doing. Like I said, if you just have an energy vector rotation on a plane, okay, that's a magnetic component that hasn't come into a magnetic field, so it doesn't have a field geometry,
Okay,
right?
hold on. Let me clear this up with you, okay? Because this is Ken Wheeler, okay?
Mhm.
This is what a magnet looks like sitting on a desk when you can see the field.
Yeah.
It is not in rotation, but the field is present. So in this, we're looking at a magnetic field. It already has the field lines. It's already there.
Well, what do you mean by
It's
it's
not in
not in the
rotation. It's not. It has no frequency to it. It is a frequency, voltage, and amperage set in the actual metal. And when you do that, it puts out this type of field, and it stays steady. There's absolutely no movement in it. Okay, that's
Well, I mean, the thing is, Nathan, except for when there is, right? And that's where magnetic flux comes into play.
well. Then you get
And
into like electromagnets and rotational magnets. Then yeah, then there's
or just creating flux in general. I mean, if you take two magnets and bring them together, traditional magnets in second grade fashion, okay, and you're just playing with them like the negative and negative pole, you're just wobbling them against each other. Well, I mean, that's creating a magnetic flux. That's creating distortion of the set field geometries, and I mean, that's kind of what's interesting about it. It is fixed in place because it's stable, because that's how it's going to create, but
well.
it's not impermeable. But why? Dimensionality, right? So there's certain conditions that this type of magnetism could affect three-dimensionally that could allow you to, like Ken Wheeler was showing here, right? Can have you be able to display what it is that the effect in our dimension is. Okay. But the whole nuance to it is that 3D, most 3D matter, okay, isn't attracted to a magnet, right? Or isn't necessarily influenced greatly by magnetism. Um, and that's because of the dimensionality of the lattice structure of the material. So, it's literally what you're seeing something like this, okay, you're actually seeing a three-dimensional representation of an upper dimensional geometry's manifestation in 3D, in its effective 3D matter, right? But it doesn't affect all 3D matter, right? And that's because there's certain components of it that just like aren't extra
Well,
dimensional. Some things are
I,
just matter.
I think gravity might argue with that. Let's stick to this magnet real quick. Just so we all understand what this is. This is a magnetodielectric effect that's basically frequency frozen in time. You remove the motion, you kept the frequency and the amperage in it, and as soon as you kept the voltage and amperage in it, and it created a magnetodielectric effect. You have the
Mhm.
dielectric in between the magnetic, okay? But it has no motion, so it has no frequency at this point. It was created with the frequency in it. That's why it's in the position it's in. It's how
I'm
you
glad you
base,
brought that up because
but it's
that's
how
what I
you
was
base
saying.
magnet strength on. Is
That's
where the
that's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
okay, all right. So when you rotate this, then it just pushes the fields out further, right? Based on the magnet you picked. Because based on where you put the frequency out and how much more magnetic, how much more amperage you put into it at that time, gives you, your magnetic field stronger. So,
When you take a material that has a high magnetic potential, like a permanent magnet, right? Its lattice structure is that if you apply a charge to it, a current to it, that uh, that energy is actually going to become entrapped within the lattice structure. So, but not become part of the atomic makeup of the material. So, what ends up happening is you end up having energy that's introduced, and those electrons they start bouncing or bouncing around in a locked formation until they stabilize and then they become nodal. Okay, and then what? Because that lattice structure is as such, it all that energy together in that lattice structure ends up creating the simulation, so to speak, of a rotational vector of the energy. And it's that the fact that it's structured that way that allows it to be fixed, because like you said, the frequency, the electrical potential, okay, is frozen in the lattice structure of the material. It's
Yeah,
so it's built,
it's
it's introduced and it's built in.
Hello.
what's up, Bernie?
Yeah, we got Vegas Bernie in the house. What's good, brother?
Woo! Hope y'all are doing good. I'm sorry I couldn't join sooner. This is totally my style of episode. Cold fusion, way easier than you think. So you're letting one of my big secrets out because it's way easier than you think.
Yeah, we're talking about
Yeah.
magnets right now, Bernie, and how Ken Wheeler showed that magnetic effect, that it's always there.
Always fundamental force.
Well, I don't know that it's a fundamental force. Basically, it's definitely an effect of a force, that's for sure.
Definitely.
Well, see, this is where we come into the whole part with Dr. What was his name? Dr.
Waping you.
Yep, Dr. You.
Dr. You.
Here's the problem with his argument. We just saw it from Ken Wheeler. That magnet didn't move. There's no oscillation. There's no frequency, like he said. So in a traditional magnet, there's no way in hell it could be, gravity or anything else. The
Yeah.
problem is it's an electromagnet. That's what you have to base everything off of. It's definitely magnetism, but it's electromagnetism, which gives it a different property, which means it's always in motion, and it's never a stagnant field that builds out like a freaking donut. Okay,
Yeah.
that's just when they talk about that. This when you see, I don't want to say this. When you see what you're seeing, you are now understanding what they were talking about when they said the magnetic field and why it works that way. Okay, not Faraday, but the other guy. I forget what's his equations.
Maxwell.
Maxwell. Okay, this is Maxwell's equation right here. A stagnant magnetic field that has no rotation, that has no movement, but it doesn't bounce in and out either. That's where he's wrong. It stays as a stagnant field. Okay, there's no frequency
that's
to
super
it.
nuanced, though, Nathan, because like
It
I said
has to
about
be.
well, hold on. So, like we said about the lattice structure being the mechanism in which those conditions can be created, the fact is that the energy that's locked up in that lattice structure, okay, it is stable, but it's stable in a form of rotational oscillation itself. So, what you end up with is the macroscopic sum of the whole, which appears still. Okay, but that's only because that the energy that's trapped is the thing doing the oscillating, just very, very in onto itself and interactive of that of what's next to it and in relationship with it, which is another energy potential that's stuck.
But that's
So
not the way
whenever
the
you have
equation's
that,
written.
it's sitting there stuck like this, spinning around in a circle, and then the next thing over, it's doing the same thing. The sum of the whole, from what you can observe with your eyes, is something that is still. Okay, now
No,
that
hold
does
on,
not.
no. We are not saying that that's moving.
Well,
I don't care what scale you look
no,
at. That
there's
ain't
no
moving.
flow. There's no flow, but the cause of it is micro movement.
Yeah, the cause of it because it had a frequency going through it at one time and it was stopped. Okay, and then that's what stuck. Okay, that's the field that was created. It doesn't continuously move.
I'm not talking about the magnetic field that you're observing in that thing. I'm talking about what creates that magnetic field in the first place. So let me ask you this, and this is why I said it's nuanced. Okay, the field itself might not have flow in a permanent magnet, like you're saying, and I'm not disagreeing with that. But if all the parts that it's made of have a specific motion and are arranged in a certain way, is it still, because that's what you're claiming, and I don't agree. You see, because you can't say it's still if the parts it's made of are all moving.
Do you know why it's still? It is frequency locked in time. Okay. It is still because as soon as you change the frequency, you change the voltage and amperage and change the field itself. It is a thing locked in time. So if you put heat on it, you're going to change the frequency, which is going to change the amount of value of your magnet. Okay. But then you're adding motion to it.
Isn't heat
This has
movement?
no motion
No, when
But
you
heat
heat it up, the
movement.
lattice structure changes, and then it
because
can
you're
no
changing
longer
the
be body.
frequency. You're saying that the frequency is still moving. It's not.
I know. I'm not saying that the frequency is moving. I agree
If it has
what you're
motion, you're saying the
but-
frequency's moving. That's what you're saying. If you're saying it has any motion, then the frequency must change.
Mhm.
I don't think you're picking up what I'm putting down, because I don't agree with it. I mean, I do agree with the overall sum of what you're saying, but it's like, but I mean, if you think that whatever frequency is locked in, okay, then what makes it a frequency? What is it frequent of if it's not in some type of alternating state? What is an alternating state? It's motion. That's my point. You see,
But this
like,
isn't
so,
flowing. This
well, I
this
said that. Right.
that's
There's
not flowing.
no flow because it's made up of bits that are fixed, and that's it.
Yeah, it's fixed because there's no frequency to it.
Right. But the parts that make it work are in motion.
There's no motion there. Look,
Sure. Like, sure. Like, everything's in motion, man. If something's not in motion, I hate to tell you what it is, it ceases to fucking exist.
Nathan, didn't you say when I was at your place that everything is in motion?
everything is in motion. Okay,
Except for whatever makes
but if you
a
can't
permanent magnet.
coherently describe why it's in motion, then I'm not going with the argument.
Well, I just think I coherently
Because
described
here's the
that,
thing.
though.
There's a simple answer to this. Magnets degrade over time, so it does have a frequency that will disintegrate over time. Yes. Okay. Would we ever know that anything is not in motion? No, because we're in some fucking big ass ball that keeps rotating. We'll never know anything without motion. Okay. We can't get out to any part that's not in motion. It's not possible. Okay.
So let me ask
What
you.
I'm saying is
Hold on.
it's a frequency set in time. Okay. Your time dilation inside that magnet has slowed so far. Okay. It's going to take so many years to even notice a movement. That's the argument you should make. Not it's just sitting there and it's all moving. No. You have
Okay, but okay, so I want to ask you this. I want you to kind of answer your own question.
I know what the answer is. But that can never be gravity because
right, nobody's saying gravity though. What is the mechanism?
That's what the doctor said.
Hold on. So what is the mechanism of a permanent magnet losing its strength over time? Because if you don't know,
secretion and frequency is what it is.
Correct. Right, which is the reduction of its motion. And the thing is that as that frequency reduces, okay, it has a fluctuation, which then makes it move in the trap lattice differently until the point that it can actually escape. Because as you know, you can't destroy that energy. Okay, so the change in the frequency no longer allows it to be locked into the lattice structure because the geometry, it's like imagine if you had a box with a hole in it the exact same size as a ping pong ball. Okay, the exact same size, and you were to sit there and shake it at the same exact rate. Okay, the odds of that ball coming out of that hole are so slim that it's not even funny. But if you start shaking it at a different rate, all of a sudden the way that it moves around the box is different. So, it has a greater chance at certain rates to exit that hole. And that's sort of the idea. You know what I mean? It's like it's trapped, but as it reduces, it's not being held in anymore like that because it's not bouncing around being stuck through coupling because it's coupled.
Hold on. I want to say, Ulysses, thank you for 5 Old Man Bill's memberships, dude. You're awesome, brother. Okay.
Absolutely. And sorry, I just want to also throw in prayers for Sean Calderon that he's able to heal and his health improves, because we love Sean and we love his work.
Absolutely.
Right on.
So, okay. Oh, man, the ball's in the hole.
Balls in the hole. Well, we got a big ball behind us.
Look.
So if the ball's in the hole, though, what do you do with the rest?
Oh, hold on. The whole problem in what the doctor said about this is a very simple understanding. Time dilation is the key to gravity. Okay? It's creating the spheres. Okay? It's creating coupling. It's not high energy. High energy is coupled. If we don't have it coupled, we do not have a magnetosphere. We have no zone on the outside of our planet to hold the plasma. It's not possible. Okay? That's the problem. You can't brute force something. And every time I talk to some physicists, they want to brute force something, and they do it in a completely asinine way. Okay? They don't understand the subtlety of coupling. Okay? Magnetodielectric effect has to be coupled. The doctor is continuously saying they don't. That's a problem. That's a major malfunction in what's going on here and what he says. Okay? It is a no from the beginning because we are in a giant electromagnet. And as soon as you do that, you have to take the rotational rate of the actual Earth into account. Okay, which means you have frequency, which is RPM. Okay, it's as simple as that. Okay, his argument fails on that, even though he's in the right neighborhood. He's got the wrong zoning, man. Completely wrong zoning. Okay, not only that, how can you understand gravity if you don't understand every type of different magnetism that goes on?
I
mean,
agree.
if you can't see that, dude, just poke out your eyeballs and stop talking about physics, okay?
Well, I think that's why NASA's still grounded pretty much and using rockets, right? They don't really understand gravity. Just saying.
I mean, everything that's out there has its own form of, well, to a degree, I say everything loosely, has its own degree of magnetic component, but that magnetism is not all the same. And again, the geometry of the magnetism and what type of magnetism it is, okay, is significant, as to what the relationship is to anything else, because it's all relative. So, like the position, for instance, in a magnetic field and what type of magnetic field that is makes a difference. And when you're in an electromagnetically induced magnetic field, and you're on the inner geometries, you got to realize that once you're on the central planes, central axes, and the closer you get to the center of that magnetic field, the relationship of the polarity starts to change, and that's significant to know too, because again, that goes against what people typically think. It's no different, okay, than the two types of charges, as they want to say, although they're pretty much the same thing, right? When they're headed toward each other, okay, you would think in your mind, well, that they want to connect, so they will, but they don't. They actually move away from each other because they see each other as the same, and the same things. They repel when they're headed directly toward each other, because it's like looking itself in a mirror. And then because they change, then it's not until they come over and cross it at 45 or less that then they go to make the connection. And that's significant in terms of this, because it has direct relationship to the geometries of magnetism, because magnetism works exactly the same way.
Sorry, this guy in the chat says you're hope you didn't pee in the pool, Bernie.
Shout out Samo. I also wanted just to state that two other parts of gravity related to one being magnetism, is temperature, right? The hotter it gets, the weaker the magnetic field. And is that why flame and heat escapes is because of magnetism being related to gravity and breaking that, and then also rotation on a propeller, right? Is that what's propelling? It's rotation in that you're counter rotating, and that's another way that breaks gravity.
Well, it's like I said, airplanes are anti-gravity. Fight me. You know what I mean? Like, if you
Yep.
don't believe that,
Well,
I'll tell you why you're wrong.
hold on. The iron works that way in heat, getting rid of it, right? Until you saturate it. Then the iron changes. So anytime that you put it in a ZVS and you put the iron in there, drop it in, okay? It'll get rid of heat until it turns one color, okay? That's when you hit saturation. Then it changes the properties of the actual iron itself. See,
Mhm.
that's when you get into superconductivity because you have a complete saturation of a field. Okay, so you gotta just make sure you put that in there. Okay, because some people get the wrong idea, man. They think, oh, it's always doing this. No, 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 not always. That's why you've got to look at superconductivity when you deal with certain different things like cobalt and stuff. You bring cobalt down to a certain temperature, it's superconductive. If I was in space, that would be the one metal that I use for everything. Okay, because when it gets to a superconductive property, boom, there goes a transformer. Automatically works 100 times better in space than it would anywhere else. All you got to do is chill it while you're in space, and if you understand space is cold already, making something even
Right.
colder is not that hard.
I agree.
I
Yeah,
mean,
without a doubt. I mean, I obviously superconductivity,
Right, like
has to
why
do
aren't
with
they
it.
superconducting everything in space? Because it's supposed to be free, like absolute zero, pretty much up
But
there. So you'd think everything should be superconductive.
but that's
but
not
does it?
the
But
that's not the
but
temperature they're superconductive at.
but realistically, when you look at superconductivity holistically, right? Superconductivity means literally no resistance, right? No, so you know that everything to do with magnetism, gravity, okay, and time dilation, all three components, okay, are all as a result of the same fucking thing, and that's resistance. Okay, and fluctuations in resistance and relationship of things and how they deal with that resistance. So uh, that's really kind of what it boils down to. Once you just understand that which is holding everything back. But what is resistance? Well, in my opinion, and again, it's a little theoretical, right? But I believe that resistance is simply the exchange rate of the upper dimensional energy, okay, and the matter. Okay, so it's just that exchange rate. Now, if you sit there and you open it up to a void, okay, then you have that upper dimensional axis that allows that exchange rate to increase by orders of magnitude and allow that energy to flow in and interact with that matter, creating high energy densities. You know, that's sort of how I look at it.
Okay,
Okay.
one of the ways, I'll just tell you something. You want to create some anti gravity in a rock, okay? I heard Gerald talk about this forever. I don't think he's got it. So let me just tell you what it is. It's not necessarily anti gravity. You're creating vibration. As
Mhm.
soon as you create vibration in the crystalline structure inside of the granite, and you have water in there, you're creating a pathway for it to be easier to push that thing around. The weight is no longer the same. It's the same way as if you take a giant thing of cement, right? And you put it on the ground, you can't move it, right? But if you rock it back and forth, you can get it moved, okay? But now understand this. Now place it on top of a little drum here and go like this with the drum. What happens? It vibrates right across the whole platform without a problem. So what do you actually do? And you're activating the quartz itself in order to do it. Why? Because quartz is one of those things that as soon as you tap it, it taps back, tap it, it taps back, and it automatically creates the oscillation for you. So if
Mhm.
you now have it in water, you saturate the oscillation in it, and now you can move heavy stone without a problem versus not being able to move it at all. That was a simple key. It's not necessarily floating it above the surface and putting it out. It's creating the vibration in order to move it. It doesn't get stuck in the sand. It continues to move, so it moves. You know what I mean? It's easy to push. It's a
Well,
simple way to understand what they were doing back then. Is they created the frequency that was in the actual crystal. That's as simple as it gets,
well,
man.
I
It's
mean,
it's
rock or
easy.
no rock, all matter falls into that same subject matter
That's what I'm
when dealing with
saying.
gravity, right? And you would know this if you've ever had a vibrating like plate, or something, or a table that's shaking, and you move something across the surface. Ironically, there's certain frequencies that it could vibrate at that will make it much more difficult to move
Oh yeah, I agree with
across
that.
that surface. There's some that would have little effect, and some frequencies that would make it glide, like rapidly, because it's literally oscillating. It's bringing it into resonance. It's oscillating at a similar rate. That similar rate decouples it because it doesn't know the difference, but it's not connected, right? So it thinks, if you want to, call it that it's the same thing, but because it's not bound through a lattice, it is able to drift away from it
Yeah,
because it thinks it's part of it but it's not.
but that's the secret
So,
of movement.
yeah, well, yeah,
Giving
it's
away
cool.
secrets. Uh-oh.
Now I've done this before with the CME experiment that I told you I did, which again, unfortunately, because have to use my camera, my phone rather, to make it work at the moment, at least. I have had a hard time recording it, but by putting that box on the speaker, having a resonance chamber in the center, okay, creating an isolation, loose isolation. It's not hermetically sealed or something, you know, just a small isolation of that resonant chamber, and then having the uh, hexagonal cells that are all sealed off. The amplification event is phenomenal that occurs, and if you dampen, and remember, dampening is important when it comes to vibration, right? So when you have it properly dampened to the point where it's actually just moving, you put stuff on top of it. Okay. And as the frequency changes, when it finds that frequency it likes, it starts moving around. And it does that, okay, different than just maybe you've seen before when you hit that state, because it kind of looks like it's like moving, like alive moving, kind of like,
Yeah, yeah. No, no.
back and forth, like almost like walking itself and meandering a bit. I'm not saying that it's sentient and knows
Well,
where the fuck it's going or something like that, but I'm saying that there's a very definite um motion to it that sets it apart just from something shaking on a table.
yeah. Well, okay. Check this out. It kind of goes back to John Hutchinson, how he was cleaning the river. You see him turning the dial back and forth, right? Well, what he's actually doing is in a crystal, the frequency's not the same all the way around it. It continuously changes each one you get around. So where you have one frequency, you may hit the magnetic field, which will create the oscillation in it, right? But the next frequency won't do that. Okay. So what he's doing is he's hitting the continuous frequency around the crystal because he learned from the crystal cells how they work. So you hit frequency, 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 and every single one of them is different. So you're getting a different effect out of each one as this thing takes in energy. It's kind of the hidden science of crystals that people don't understand. That's why you can
Mhm.
slap a piezo buzzer to the side of one of these and hit the right frequency, but it won't necessarily mean you hit it for every single one of them. Put multiple ones on there, put them at different frequencies, and then you're going to get max power out of this thing. Put it in the wrong frequency, and you're going to shatter the whole thing. Okay, Joe found that out when he put the RAV in there.
True story. And
Right.
the other crazy thing is that it the proof is in the pudding. Look at crystal oscillators, where you put it into water and it literally creates a phase change in the water, right? It'll break apart.
Oh, you're giving away more of my secrets, Joe.
Yeah,
Finish your
exactly. Well, don't worry.
fusion.
Listen, Bernie, you're a sharp guy, but you know, it's like these things. It's
I
been
know, it's
sitting
no
in the
secret.
puddle for a long time. It's like, well, let me ask you this, right? And this is a great question to ask while Bernie's here, right? If you introduce a charge, okay, to water, okay, and then you place a crystal oscillator into said water, which it's vaporizing. Okay, well, what's doing with that vapor? Because realistically, first of all, if it's in a state of confinement, okay, it's still going to carry that charge because it's equally as conductive and able to carry that charge potential.
Well,
It'll
it
still carry that charge potential,
self-organizes.
but the further, more diffuse it gets, right, the further away it gets, it's not really able to interact with itself anymore.
Well, so there's
It
it does in a sense that it self-organizes and it causes charge separation in that, and then through that process you get the phase shift.
Perfect. So the thing, and that's what ties directly into what Nathan and I had proposed, which just seemed so perplexing at the time, but made so much sense, which is what's deterministic of what is the anode and what is the cathode?
Charge.
Charge, right? But
Charge.
what's deterministic of which is which? Because the charge is
Yes.
the same. It has to do with density.
Well, exactly. And charge
It has to do with
density. And now
density.
you're getting into my engineering of different electrodes where I've been able to make electrodes that act as both anodes and cathodes simultaneously within something.
Which is what the RAV does, by the way. And that's what we were
Absolutely.
saying all along, is that you could put two positive charges on it. It is going to choose, okay, based on the conditions, which acts as the anode, which acts as the cathode, okay, based on the mass and density. Okay, so when you have what gets chosen as the cathode, right? Well, if you're just running two electrodes, okay, and one's out of the water, let's say, okay, and one is in the water, okay, the water and the container in which the water is held becomes the mass. Okay, it becomes in a more diffuse state. It therefore falls into a cathodic state, whereas the other would be in a more concentrated state and therefore choose an anodic state. That's it. Like that's the difference.
Okay.
And if you were to switch the two wires, one that was previously the anode and the one that was previously the cathode, and you switch them, the water would still be the cathode.
Now you're getting into some of my engineering secrets, but I'm not going to elaborate on that quite yet. I'm going to wait till I get back to Nathan so I can do some demonstrations with that.
And why? Because the energy is just simply energy, and the relationship of what's what is all relative. That's it. It's always been relativity all along.
Okay. Somebody wanted to see the experiment. This is double RAV. Okay. This is basically the anode and cathode are to the one on the left and one on the right. And then the plate on the bottom acts as an intermediary. So it acts as the cathode in this whole thing that goes from one side to the other. Okay. So you see it get bright on one side and then go back to the other. It's oscillating back and forth is what it does. So when you want to look at this, it's like a goalpost. Like I said, football goalpost, it's real easy. One side and the other, that's the cathode, goes in like this, okay? Goes from one side to the next, just like this. That's what it's doing. Basically creating the flux. So,
That's it.
but the whole thing is to get it to create oscillation like that in an AC field, which is what Bernie's doing in water.
Mhm.
It's automatically doing it as soon as he lets off the energy. I saw it myself when he did it. He unplugged it and the thing kept working.
Right?
It was pretty slick, huh? I thought it was. We should have
Well,
recorded
thank
that
you.
one.
Oh, we will. We'll do it all over again. Don't you worry. We got that and much more coming when I get back, Nathan. We still got another month of me being there to do all sorts of good things.
Oh yeah.
Are you
Well,
filing for citizenship while you're here? What are you doing?
he feels
So
like it.
I think so. I'm either going to try to find me an American wife or I'm going to stay the full 3 months and a day and then see if I can like self-deport and claim that $2,500 that they do for self-deporting, right? If you're
That's
illegal.
fun.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's you know what, man. Leverage whatever you got. I don't really care. I just think it's funny if your highest viewed YouTube video was you getting locked up by fucking ICE and throwing a fit over it.
I keep saying this, and so many people are like, Bernie, we're calling ICE on you. I'm like, no, don't take my bounty.
Right. Everyone's in cahoots. It's like you know what I mean? A $5,000 reward to turn Bernie in, but Bernie's like, all right, here's what you got to do to turn me in.
Right? Yeah. Just split the bounty with me.
Here's my
Split the
Venmo.
bounty. Okay, I still got 2 months left before I'm illegal, so I got some time to figure it out.
All right, good man.
All right, I love you guys. I'm sorry I gotta get to going to lunch here, but we will see you hopefully later tonight, either on League of Extraordinary Adventures and/or Traveling Fools. Both
That's
great
good.
programs.
I need to touch base with you, brother, anyway, because I saw a clip from Cosmic Summit this year, and the guy was just talking about monoatomics and mana, and
You're
you
talking
know,
about what's his nuts there? The God, I know Timothy Hogan. Timothy Hogan is who you're talking about.
Timothy Hogan. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So I watched his seminar, which finally came out recently, I guess, because Cosmic Summit holds it back
Yep.
for a while, and I was impressed with what he said, but I just felt dirty hearing this conversation without one single mention of Crypto Alchemist.
Oh, thank you.
I'm just saying,
Right. Well,
it felt
I'm
dirty.
probably going to be challenging Timothy Hogan at some point because he makes things unstable and they oxidize, and that's kind of toxic and kind of poisoning people. So, but that's a whole
And that's
other
fair.
rainbow for another day.
Hey,
Love you guys, and hopefully we'll see you
hey, hold
tonight.
on, Bernie. Before you
Okay.
leave, I
Yep.
gotta ask, dude. You went to Vegas to work, okay? That was the
Yep.
whole premise of going. I have not seen one day of work at all. Okay.
Well, that's because I've actually been working. I just haven't been recording it yet because it hasn't been set up yet. But that's in Calnavari where Steve lives, and that's where I've been staying. But then Steve's friend Glenn, who was there, he just happened to have a free timeshare on the strip.
Oh.
So he invited me out to the strip. So I'm on the strip for a few days, soaking up the free this free epic resort and enjoying myself. So I'm having a little vacation time, but don't worry, tomorrow I'm headed back to the desert and I will be working nonstop. And oh my God, Nathan, the library that Steve has and that he's given me copies of stuff to bring back to you. We got homework for months to years with the amount
Wow.
of material, patents, and everything that he's got. It's gonna blow your mind. But
That's
yeah,
awesome.
I have been gloating a little bit. I have been showing off my best life as opposed to the work, but the work is going on behind the scenes.
Right on. I'm glad to hear that, Bernie. Hey, enjoy yourself while you're out there, buddy.
I thank you, my friends. Much love. We'll see you again. And guess what? I'm not making the mistake in hitting the end button. I'm actually exiting out.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank
Hey,
you.
hold on. One more
Love
thing
and
before
stuff.
you go. Just remember.
Okay.
All right. There are 3 holes.
You run into one with 2, run.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear. Apparently, what happens in Vegas goes on a Facebook the next day, and I was like,
Yes,
"No,
it
what
does.
happens in Vegas? I live stream, baby! Woo!" All right, much love, my man. My man, I should say.
Later. Oh, it's so funny. He's having a good time. That's good.
Yeah, no, he looked like he's having a great time. You know what? Dude works hard and he gets stressed out all the time about all sorts of things, that goes on, and he definitely, deserves it. So
You
good
know
for
what?
him.
I want to show Bernie's lab, dude. We were checking it out.
Oh
You
yeah,
saw it.
man, it looks great.
We set him up. Give me a second to set this up real quick. Oh, I'm pushing 100 buttons, but never the right one today. Okay, so for everybody out there, Bernie came over and we set him up this space. And by all means, we're not done yet, but it's looking cool as we go. I'll play it with the music. This is his.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. I was saying the way that it's set up there and how he's presenting and everything like that, it makes everything he generally does in shows, right? It's like so much, like it's so much more understandable. And like then certainly not that I don't take Bernie's work seriously, because it's very, very serious, advanced work. But with the setting and everything, it feels that way too. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
It feels that way too. So good for him, and good for you on setting him up.
Yeah, it's a nice, clean, organized area. Because when you look at his setup over there, he's got so much going on that he moves in and out. It's hard to understand any of it. I'm always looking at the wrong jar or something else, man.
Yeah, or flashing lights, or it's dark or whatever. And listen, I'm not saying that there's any problem with that. It's very entertaining and I follow him in what he's saying, but it's hard to see the work. It's hard to understand always what's going on. This makes it so much better.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree. And the good thing is, man, it's all coming out in like 4K, dude. It nice, clean camera work. You know what I mean? We're working on it. We're getting the best shots.
Yeah, it looks great. So tell me, what have you learned about his experiments so far?
Sorry. So basically, when he tells you put it in 5 volts and you get an immediate reaction, I see things dissolve in less than an hour. They're gone. There is nothing left. Okay, at 5 volts, which is just insane. We're talking about a little ball jar, 5 volts. He's got an anode and cathode in there. Real simple setup, right? But it's how he designs each one of them. If it's a single field, if it's a double wrapped field, 3 wrap fields, that all comes into it. Kind of a little bit of secret he does there. What materials he's using change the experiment completely on whether you can disconnect the power and it still runs. The way that he pulls the stuff out of everything and separates it is the coolest thing. Okay. He has a turkey baster. He goes over there and he sucks the stuff out, and he's got a good line on where everything is. So he's only getting the one color, right? And then he puts it in these little jars, man. It makes it look really cool. And those ones he was showing, but you can see it's really clean work. You can see the separation. There's points when the water's heavier than the other water around it, and you can see it.
That's cool.
Yeah. So when he says he goes into heavy water, he's not lying. It's right there in front of you.
Mhm.
So
Well, I mean, it's really cool because he's using physics to work the chemistry, because chemistry is physics, is what it boils down to. And when he's building those electrodes, like Nathan was saying, you could see that he methodically and purposefully wraps specific sequences, and the sequences are geometric, but they also add, aside from the geometry, they also create differences in the amount of mass that's there as well, the amount of interaction that's going on in that one zone, and that fluctuation itself is going to, like we discussed, right? It's going to create different zones of resistance, okay, different frequencies, and ultimately, if everything is put together coherently, right, in a way that makes sense, then that could act as a very clear control mechanism as to what you get on an outcome. And it's super incredible to see and think that. And I could imagine that, over time and with the configurations that he has, that that huge amounts of that energy potential, like you were saying, it gets caught up in the atomic mass structure, the lattice structure that's being broken down into the monoatomics, and becomes in relationship with it. And that allows for a cycling of that, caught up energy potential to actually run the thing even when it's off,
well,
because it's still got the energy in it.
yeah, he's not just playing with the anode cathode though. He is also playing with the water.
Mhm.
He's ionizing the water, which separates it, which you get in hydrogen, and he'll flat out go over there with a lighter and start up the hydrogen and let it burn.
Mhm.
So if you basically put it off into a chamber, you know what I mean, and condense it, you could have a fire going the whole time he's running the experiment.
Absolutely. That's what the cathode's doing, and the what's acting as the anode is going to be actually accumulating the oxygen. That's the separator of it, is and that's the relationship of anode, cathode, and water, and why it's incredible, because what hydrogen is, all right, and what oxygen. If you've listened to what I've said before about what the reason hydrogen bonds so readily with oxygen, right, is because of oxygen's oxidating properties. It's a hydrogen trap. Okay, it's a hydrogen magnet and a hydrogen trap. Okay, it literally makes sure that the hydrogen, even through energy conversion, ends back up all that potential stuck in a matter form. Pretty incredible. The only way to do away with that is to actually, funny enough, is RAV. Okay, where you take the potentials and you separate them on their sides and you do not let them get back together, because at that point, your hydrogen plasma, well, it goes into a diffuse state of energy, and all your atomic mass that's scrapped up, it'll dissipate and go to, nothing holding it together. And the oxygen would just be leaching off the entire time. So there's no combustion event.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because they use all this stuff in the thunderstorm generator, and when you know what we know, it changes how you view the experiment. We know that as soon as they ionize the water, they split. You know what I mean? The hydrogen oxygen effect. We know that you did that when you look at Stan Myers. Okay, it's can you create the condition that gives you the Townsend effect, and that's all you're trying to do. And compression will start to do that when you put it into a cylinder. You create the immediate reaction right there. The separation has a charge to it. That's why the anode and cathode keep running. It's because they have a charge to it. It has an electrical field to it. And since he didn't overwhelm it in the beginning, it's not used to that. It's set at a steady voltage of 5 volts. Okay, but I don't even think it's getting that. I think it's probably getting 2.5 volts, to be very honest with you. So when he does that, it just sets a condition for the whole thing to keep running.
Mm-hmm.
But that way you'll continue to break it. So one of the things I wanted to see while he was down here, and hopefully we could do it, is I wanted to see that little ball of light in the water. Okay? That's what I wanted to see. I want to know if it was like the other experiment, sound that created it, or is he creating a RAV? Okay? That's the one thing I just want to know when he does it. I think he's using the energy to create sound. And it's the oscillation between the two, just like a speaker, that's giving him the ability to go back and forth to each other.
I was going to say, I don't think it's a RAV. What I do think is that it's a nodal point of a standing wave that is in a very mild state of fluctuation, meaning it's stable, but just because it's stable doesn't mean it doesn't move around, in formation, right? So when you create that standing wave, if your energy pressure of that nodal point, okay, is a specific central point with an outward pressure vector, right? Well, that's going to create a cavity. And as we know, right, whenever you have a cavity in water, it's a vacuum. It's going to want to collapse. But again, what happens when you have a nodal point, and the nature of that nodal point is that it's pushing outward? Well, what ends up happening is it tries to collapse in onto itself, but it reaches a point where it's like, no, I'm outward, pushes it back out, collapse in, pushes it back out. Every time it starts to into that collapse event, okay, you're creating a fluctuation in the vacuum. That fluctuation in the vacuum is the 0 point. That is the access point. That is the zero resistance upper dimensional access point. That's the thing. And it's still in relationship with all this other water that's around it. And again, that's mass. So because it's still in relationship with mass at its greatest, where the pressure zone is in the the equilibrium state, where the boundary layer is, right? That's the direct relationship. That's what actually keeps the etheric pressure coming in with no resistance. So the exchange rate is exactly that, right? 100% or close to, right? Upper dimensional energy ether. And then you compress it, and all of a sudden, and now it's in relationship with the matter. Bang, there's your energy that's here, not there. And it happens over and over again at such a rate that it just appears to just glow and twinkle, right? It doesn't ever appear that the light goes out, because it kind of doesn't. It lasts, goes, and as it would start to fade out, it starts to collapse again and brightens up. So, pretty interesting.
It's going to be a good experiment, man. I'm
I love
excited
it.
for it.
Star in a jar.
Yeah, not the electrical one. We're looking for the one in water. That's the one we want. Yeah. But see, I think they're named the same thing, aren't they? I was looking for it.
Let me ask, like at the end of the day,
Yeah.
there's not much of a difference between a sound, one invoking one with sound and invoking one with electrically, because at the end of the day, all it has to do with it is the energy motion. So if a current, like an electrical current, okay, is analogous and the same as that of an acoustic wave that would cause the same thing, well, guess what? Energy is energy is energy is energy. at the end of the day. That's what it comes down to. Just because we sense it differently and experience it differently, we think differently about it, but that doesn't
Right.
make it different.
No, I agree with that. I don't know if I should say this or not. The way he wraps the coil is like a Tesla coil inside of a Tesla coil.
Mhm.
It goes from a DC field to an AC field.
Yep.
So you're putting in 5 volts DC, but you're getting
Yep.
back and forth in the flux. You're getting AC out of it.
Mhm.
But in a speaker, what are you doing? You're doing AC, right? So you're already creating the electromagnetic wave that is sound. Okay, but sound is also light. You see, that's the problem. You have massive compression to a sound wave, you're getting light. That's the star in the jar. That's what they're trying to tell you. As soon as you create the light, it creates a prism. As soon as it creates a prism, it's now free to have an energy state that's much higher than it is before. That's why when you look at everything in perspective, mass slows down energy. Okay? It doesn't do it any favors, it slows it down. But when you get to gases and plasma, it speeds it up. When you get to light, it goes even faster. Okay? But that's kind of the point here, right? You're compressing it to get it to go faster because you're changing what it is. You're changing from a sound wave into light. But that's the conversion factor people don't realize. Mass is a hindrance. Okay? It slows down everything. It's not something that's good.
Now, okay, so my understanding is this, okay, and this is it's a little, again, it's nuanced, right? With the star in the jar and the water with the acoustic waves, okay? Now, can you create a star in a jar with a single acoustic wave? I believe that you could. If you look at just general oscillation, which once it's in water would become acoustic through like what we were talking about before, like a crystal oscillator. Well, if that hits specifically and exactly the proper and correct frequency, at its point of, culmination at the central axes, right? It would dispel the water, the same as we talked about how you can move a rock like that or move anything like that, right? So just because there's a phase difference doesn't mean that it wouldn't follow the same principles, create a cavitation event that way with one single acoustic function. However, I'm pretty sure how it generally is formed and what would be going on in like BurnEye's experiments, for instance, okay, has less to do with a single frequency, okay, and all to do with the interference patterns of multiple frequencies, okay, creating the specific condition. And that is the standing wave at that point. And certain nodal points, if they have the correct characteristics, they would be in a cancellation event followed by like, where they would go scalar, but then on the immediately collapse. Okay. And then as soon as it collapses, it would cause an outward pressure, which would then, create a void in that space because it's effectively enough to hold the water off of it.
Well, the rotation creates that, yeah.
Right. So that's what's kind of interesting, and they usually do it by having multiple focused frequencies pointed at a specific central point. I think 3 or 4 being necessary, and the reason that is because in order to keep it from collapsing, so you need more than one to have an interaction, right? But then dimensionality comes into play. Obviously, when you're in a water medium, it's a 3-dimensional, free environment where it could go anywhere, right? Well, just like anything, okay, any sort of movement, and it's going to go off course there, fall out of that nodal zone, and then done. So you need to be able to hold it in place with, 2, 3, or 4 sources. Now, the weird thing is that because it's a wave, right? If it's
I don't think you need to hold it in that way.
They
think
do it
it'll.
with more than one. So when you Google "star in a jar" and you see that famous experiment, etc.,
Yeah.
like they're using more than one.
Of
Yeah.
of the anode cathode thing, they're doing more than one. They got
Not
one
an
set.
cathode. No, it's acoustic. Putting
Piezo's?
sound. Yeah. So I don't know if they're using piezo's or not. I know that they're using high frequency ultrasound, but I don't know if it's a piezo or if it's a modulated transducer. You know, it's probably a modulated transducer, but a multi-channel modulated transducer.
So check this
Yeah.
out, Joe.
But yeah, the point is that you could also get the same effect with one under the right conditions, but then your container geometries and that sort of thing would have to be 100% on point too, because of the reflection and reverberation and echoing and all the sorts of stuff that would happen, right?
Well, I wanted to show what happens when you spin inside water.
Mm-hmm.
You see the field it creates?
Yeah. The same one that forms right as the RAV is about to form. The one where it swoops up and around and then collapses.
Yep. So it is rotation of mass. It's just you can't confuse something solid with gas or plasma. They're all mass. E equals mc squared. They're all mass. That's what they don't understand.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the same deal with that is, that's also another offset. That's a torsion equation that's occurring right there.
No question about it.
Right, and it's a resistance, right? So if you did away with all the resistance, you wouldn't get that because the ball of them would just fluidly slide through the water without the grip. But it's a differential that exists between the material of the spinning ball and the water that allows for there to be the introduction of a resistance component, and then that resistance is actually able to propel the water at that point. It's pretty interesting, and it's a great example.
Oh yeah, but
it just also goes to show how all the same basic physics is exactly what causes everything.
Yeah, the only problem is a lot of this stuff, Joe, it's nuanced. Okay? You have to understand why you're doing it. One of the biggest problems I have is in building things, people don't understand that. They think, let's get the hypothetical understanding of something and then, it must work that way. And unfortunately, it just doesn't. You have to create things in the condition they're meant to be created in.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, then it leads to all the wrong understandings of what's going on. That's why
that's right.
People go, oh my God, we got a fusion reaction, so we'll just add more plasma with a plasma hose, right? Okay, but if you do it in open air sphere rotating, how are you going to do that? That's not physically possible. Okay? Things like that. If you get into this is how you build it versus this is how you think about it, well, even if that changes, because then if you don't understand electromagnetism and why it works, you're going to fail completely in all of it. You won't be able to create the gradient in the frequency that you want. And I've seen it all over the place, okay? You can take 5 piezo's and put them in a row, right? If I blast the energy from this, when do I turn on the next one? When do I turn on the next one, the next one? And how do I get that to create propulsion? Well, I've seen that their oscilloscope is they hit one and then it goes all over the damn place, okay? They have no understanding of timing in it, okay? And it ruins the entire experiment, and then they get mechanical noise in there and they don't know how to remove the mechanical noise. So that creates more all over the place. The fact that they don't even know that the mechanical noise is ruining the process creates a bigger problem in it, right? They're not understanding frequency, how to override things in an open air system. Dude, there's so much nuance to this stuff. It doesn't just happen. There really
is, right. Well, the nuance is it's actually funny because it's like you said, and I love what you said. It's absolutely true. It's all setting the conditions, and
yes,
and what I've been saying and a saying of mine for way, way, way longer, than I've ever thought about any of this shit. Okay. Like, it's not about having the right answer. It's about asking the right question.
Right.
So answers are easy. Questions are hard. When you sit there and you make an observation, you think that you have a data point. So now, well, the apparent thing would be if you put more, then you get more, right? Well, we know that's not always true. But when you have a fundamental understanding of what each and every single piece is doing, okay, mechanically, well, then you could sit there and figure out what it is you actually need, right? And what needs to change. And that becomes the first right question to ask. What do I need? What needs to be exploited here? And what is the mechanism of that? Because once you figure that out, you realize that everything follows only very few actual rules of physics. Very few. And they all have to do with the same exact thing, which is one thing's relationship to another. Okay. And how they interact and how much of it's interacting, and dimensionally, it just means, there's again, it becomes very nuanced because of you have to ask the right question. If you're going to sit there and look at it at face value and you say, okay, well, if I did X, Y, Z and now it works, well, if I continue along this line, then I'm going to do better. That's not the answer. Sometimes the answer is, reduce the moving parts, figure out what's not needed, what's not conditional, and then figure out what what three variables are in play. Once you know the variables that are in play and the proportions in which they're functioning, well, cool, go with that, and then if you want a different effect, but based on the same principles, take what works, okay, and then rather than change the entire thing and start from the ground up, start with what works and then make the mechanical changes necessary to change the dynamic, to change the outcome. These are basic principles of metaphysical manifestation. You must set the conditions and must be open to the outcome, in order for that to be a great possibility of occurring. If you're not in coherence, right, with what it is you hope for, and you have doubt about it, it is very unlikely to happen. Because you're not acting in accordance with your desire. You see, so that's exactly it. People get caught up in all this shit and following these dead end paths or dead end trains of thought because they're not keeping an open mind. They have preconceived notions, and they follow those preconceived notions rather than being open to their observation and logic of their understanding of the environment as a whole. And that's what it comes down to, I think. I know that meshed a whole bunch of things together all at once, but realistically, ask the right questions and know the very, very basics, and then realize how those basics apply at all the scales.
Okay, so I wanted to show this. This is what they call a sound wave, right? I want you to look at something. Take the line in the center and pretend it's a wire.
Mhm.
Now you'll understand the electromagnetic effect. Okay? It flows around it.
Mhm.
It flows in layers. Okay? And how do we know that? Because no matter what they tell you about DC, I'm going to tell you that they set a frequency and then that gives you your voltage and amperage difference. That is a fundamental fact of how it works. Even though they say, oh, it just turned on to a certain value. Yeah, what's that value? Where the frequency's at is what the value is. But this looks like something a little bit different, right? So you see each wave coming into it. So how do you change DC to AC? And this is the question, right? Well, you stack DC waves one on top of the other, which means that you must be building a frequency in order to get to the top. Okay? Which means it looks like this in the end anyway. Okay?
Right, right.
But
Well,
what
when you put resistance on DC, it ends up collapsing into a waveform eventually.
yeah, well, what I'm trying to say is they say this is a sound wave, which is correct. But it's also the magnetodielectric effect, which is also how light works.
Right. It's
So
also right. It's a current. It's
it
also the wave function of a photon.
yeah. But that
You know what I mean? Like, what is it? The fact that that's
it's
what I said before. Energy is energy is energy is energy. Like at the end of the day, it's all the same shit, and that's
yeah.
exactly what it is.
But it also layers the magnetic field. If you look at it as each one of those layers is a different type of mineral that created that magnetic field, now you understand why you have no idea what you're into in gravity because there's so many of them. So the only way to get gravity to do anything for you is you can no longer do this. You can no longer try to make the energy.
Mm.
You now have to figure out how to control energy from the backside. Once it's already created, how do you control it? That's how you figure it out. That's why coupling matters. So I just wanted to show that. I thought it was interesting, man. People don't they don't take things that far. They plug in their device and say, "Oh, it works." That's what they do. They
Yep,
you know
that is true.
I get so many things, man, putting coils inside of coils and trying to figure out what's going on, creating oscillations in them. That peanut coil created AC in it, gave me the exact waves that Sean gets in his AC coils. It looked
Yep.
beautiful,
Hmm.
awesome to look at, but then my AC flyback did the same thing.
Yeah. Well, so like, and I always said this, and I was trying to explain it at the time, and I just think that you have a different perspective on the same information now than you did at those times. But what I was explaining about the geometries is that more times than not, when you're building it in that type of configuration, you're not going to get some crazy effect because like of a standing wave pattern or this type of interference. What you're doing is you're creating zones based on the geometry of different fluctuating relationships of the field that is created by the coil. So, for instance, if you have one in the case of the peanut, right, you're starting off at a larger diameter and progressively shrinking that diameter, okay, and then expanding it again. So, what you're doing is you're taking these frequencies that are occurring and interacting with each other at each wind, okay, and you're bringing it from one state, okay, to where now its rotational state has accelerated, okay, because even the but it's proportional and relative. It's accelerated because the diameter is smaller, but yet it's still traveling the same 360 degrees, okay, in relation to the above and below it, okay, but it's reducing in its size, so it's reducing in its mass, and it's also reducing in the distance it has to travel in order to make that same rotation. So that causes a frequency change. Then it starts to expand again, and all of a sudden, because it starts to expand, it becomes into a more diffuse state. Okay, then because it kind of got concentrated as it was spinning up, but then all of a sudden it hits this wall where it's going to have to expand again. That other frequency change now, is it a form of resistance? Yes. Now, is that resistance necessarily a loss? No, not necessarily a loss. But that change from that diameter and length relationship to rotational, speed, so to speak, right? That creates a fluctuation in it. Okay. And once you start to expand it again, and then it's growing out, and then it starts to contract again, now you're doing it multiple times and creating an event where every single time it goes one way, it has to push back the next. Well, it goes one way, it has to push back the next
Well,
because there's a resistance change multiple times throughout the system.
Yeah, well, that's the point. You're creating pressure, so the magnetic field over here is larger than the one over here, and you're basically creating pressure between them, so it oscillates between the two. It's a forced oscillation, which is AC, which is just moving the magnetic flux from one side to the other, back and forth like this. That's what all AC is. It's no different than vibrating the ground in order to get a rock to move. That's AC. But
Right.
it's also why an inverter can act as an AC DC pull. Okay, like we were discussing before in a different thing. That's why it works. It's because you're getting a back and forth between an AC and DC voltage in an inverter when you put it in an oscillation mode. So it'll react that way. But it's no different than creating that in the coil. But that's the same thing that an AC flyback does. It goes back and forth, and then whichever one has more resistance in the shorter wire, you know what I mean, is the one that becomes the cathode in the situation. Okay? It
Exactly.
can't build up enough field inside the coil to be the positive, so it takes the negative value. That's it. It's AC and DC are not different energies that go into it. You could create AC out of a DC pulse. It's the
Exactly.
same thing. It's just how you set up the geometry. So when we look at some of this stuff, the geometry is the most important part of everything that we do. Just so everybody understands, it sets the condition of what you're
Absolutely.
doing.
Hmm.
So if it's a sphere, it compresses towards the inside, which changes how light actually looks. But if you don't do that and you create a linear faction, it actually changes how light looks. Light is a reflection. It's a mirror effect. They say the same thing in Egypt all the time. People don't get it. When you do a laser, you are focusing the light to create the light to go inward towards each other, and it goes out in the field. So why do you get a double slit experiment that goes bad? Well, it's because you're not understanding that factor. It's already rotating. It's already going, and then you what? You hit a wall. Now it acts as a prism and opens up. Okay, why? Because you put in a magnetic field in there with your body, okay, as capacitance, or you did it with a camera. You
Hmm.
change the condition of the room. It's as simple as that, but people don't understand that because they go, "Oh man, it's in a spherical form now, so it's got to be a different energy." No, it's not. It's the same one as your laser. We just simply change the geometry. And as soon as you change the geometry, you change the condition of the field. That's as simple as it gets. But people don't understand that. And they start playing with the geometry wrong. It's the same thing that leads to bad habits when you get over to that whole donut thing. That's a whole bad habit that went absolutely asinine wrong because they didn't understand what they were doing. Faraday used a sphere. He did not take a donut and put it in the center and do all of his tests based on that. So, how can you write a formula based on a donut when you're dealing with a sphere? Okay? You have to understand the experiment you're looking at and what he did. I think that's the biggest failure in physics. Okay?
Yeah. No, it's a good point. And here's a little thought experiment. Think about like actual hydrodynamics for a second, okay?
Okay?
And what I want you to suppose is that you have your donut like a tokamak, right? Which was the point of what we were saying today. Now, check this out. And this is, I kind of already said this, but in a different way. But now imagine that you have water, okay? And you're spraying water into the inside of this donut,
Okay?
okay, in on like a 45-degree and a pitched angle. And the whole entire point of what you're doing, okay, is you're going to create
A swirl
more or
inside the
less,
donut.
it's going to ride the walls 360 degrees. Now, let's say that you put the flow and the pressure, okay, which is, all right, flow and pressure, voltage and amperage, right? So let's say you put the flow and the pressure of the water, okay, to a high enough rate, okay, that it's able to go all the way around your donut, okay? Well, what the fuck happens when the the leading end of that rotation meets its maker? Well, you have instability. There's a huge differential that occurred, because there's losses. It's not superconductive, and it's not in a dense state. It's in a less stable and state than when it left, and it's about to meet back up with the stable state. Now, the question is, provided that this water flow and pressure was induced laminarly, so in other words, like you'd have to have a like an introduction point that would literally be at the corresponding angles, right? And so basically the water could ride over it if you get it, right? Water riding on water.
Okay.
So you get what I mean?
Before we go any further, water's going to be different than a field of energy only because you have magnetics in a field of energy, which means you have repulsion at the point where it comes back into itself, where it creates, okay? Where water doesn't. It's going to go right through each other, and you're going to create disturbance.
No, the point is that the differential is too different, and that if and when it catches its tail or its tail crashes on it, it's going to destabilize. That's the point. It's not different than the energy is not different than water. You know,
but it is because
the differentials
in a donut we're getting saturation. We're getting saturation in a donut. We're getting the field that goes 360 degrees all the way around, no matter what. It keeps spiraling until you get saturation.
Mm-hmm.
But the water only does that when it fills up, and then it'll have the flow inside the water.
Under ideal under that circumstance, that's correct. But for visualization, that's I chose to leave it as it is what happens when it catches its tail at the source. Well, the tail, it has to be powered or else it stops. And as soon as it meets the rear, the differential is so great that it causes an instability of the leading edge, and everything that passes over it after that. That instability doesn't only affect the leading edge, although it does the most. Over time, it leads to the losses of that which created it in the first place. Over enough time, enough degradation and interference occurs that it no longer is sustainable. And that's the idea of it. And that's why I brought it up. And that's why I was saying with tokamak before. Remember, I was like, well, you're going to have higher densities at certain points, and it's chasing its tail. What happens with that? And that's why it's not great. Why is it not great? Because it never fully formed as a sphere. See, because a sphere doesn't have that problem because you added a full-blown extra dimension to it.
Okay, so let me just say this about tokamak, okay? They run it continuously where the plasma keeps flowing, right? What happens when you pulse it? Okay? Then you just get a reaction from the magnet which compresses it immediately, which means you're condensing the energy at one point, right? And if you pull that energy out, then it makes sense. But they're not pulsing it. They're continuously flowing it. So like the water, it's going to be a real crap flow, okay? But if they pulsed it, then they can condense the energy right away, and then they pull it right away at its highest value. You know what I mean? They're not doing any of that. They're not taking advantage of that natural condition. That right there would probably get them a lot further than what they're getting at now. But that would mean that they would have to take trillions of volts and create it in the gigantic reactor that they created to do this. Do you know what the great thing about the RAV is and the understanding of it, Joe? Is it's the same thing Tesla was talking about when he's pumping the earth. Okay? Create two towers, pump the earth back and forth, just like you would the RAV. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Create the energy, pull it out in the center point. That's exactly what he was trying to say. It's not that difficult. We can pull the energy of the earth in the exact same manner. That's why it's more important than some tokamaks. That's like child's play energy compared to what the earth does. and it's just two towers pulling back and forth to one another. Okay,
Yep.
it's the same thing I'm trying to show with my Tesla coils when I reduce the energy. How do I get the trigger voltage to go, the energy in the system to go lower than my trigger voltage on a MOSFET? Because I'm bouncing them back and forth at the explosion event in order to create an increase in the actual MOSFET to get it to trigger higher. Okay, but it's doing it based on its own oscillation frequency that it's setting out to do.
Oh, by the way, we brought something up before, and then we kind of went on long about the subject, and I didn't throw this one in there. Remember when we were talking about the RAV, and we were talking about the sun and time dilation, right? And we were talking about the differential of frequencies, right, and how they have to be layered out in order for these things to occur. Then we know that Sean, he took the photo HARP measurements and he got the layered frequencies. We saw that. We knew that. So, we see that. But then there's especially in the earliest experiments, it was the most apparent. But there was also the very definite pulse rate that light was emitting from it. And what you noticed is that the frequencies what it's made of are much higher frequencies than that which are measured. Okay. And then all those culminating, then lead to the pulse event. And that pulse event is actually one.
Bless you.
Thank you. It was one pulse approximate per second, 1 hertz. Okay. Well, how do you go from having a thing made of very high frequency, to a reduced frequency in layers, to having an outcome of one pulse? Well, the answer is all that portion is time dilation. We're actually observing the time dilation externally because we're not measuring it from the relative perspective of inside the RAV. You see, we're measuring it from outside the RAV in our own unaffected, or minimally affected environment. Okay.
Huh?
So what we're viewing is one pulse a second, is only relative to our time dilation, in my opinion. And that's one of the things where the frequency goes because of all the resistance that ought to occur, but it doesn't act as an energy loss. It acts as a frequency change. That's it. So and why? Because of the torsion and the spin. See? Torsion, the spin, pressure, all your differentials change. The gravity fucking goes high internally, and then that changes the whole entire, local dilation. The same as we were talking about when you get closer to the center of the earth. No different. We're looking at it from beyond the surface of the earth, but when you're there, right, it's much different. That time dilation is much different. That gravity is much different, much greater.
Let's look at this. How do you get a nuclear explosion without the explosion, but you get the effects? See, Ashton talks about that all the time, but do you really know what that means? How do you get the time dilation field that's holding in the energy of the blast without the blast itself?
Torsion.
It's the time dilation field. But that's
time dilation field, but what is that? It's torsion. It's the resistance. It's the energy
torsion of three different fields.
It's the
not
energy
torsion of one.
Right.
And they can't hold on. They cannot go the same direction because they'll never hold each other in.
No.
They have to go different directions to hold each other in, or else it all goes into one mush. He goes away.
The greater field geometry, and that's correct. And that's why when I sent you that diagram the other day, if you want to put that up, in fact, I think people would like that. Do you remember the one with the blue and the red and the tetragrammaton in the middle with the RAV?
I have no idea where that is, Joe.
Oh man, oh man.
So
I'll send it to you right now. Hold on. Let's see if I can do that without dropping.
oh, sorry. Yeah, but our military's using time dilation fields. I don't know if anybody's figured that out yet, but they do. That's why it's kind of hard to talk about. That's why would you get rid of a fusion if you knew you could create a fusion? Because you're creating a time dilation field, and they knew it. Because you don't go from the A bomb and having that statement of how do I get the effects of it without the explosion, and then go into fusion and not understand it correctly. It's that simple. You created a time dilation field to understand it. Now you could properly put it into perspective.
Yeah, so I sent that to you, and I think that for simplicity purposes, this shows the anode-cathode relationship and how the fields get built better than any demonstration that I've put forth so far to visualize it. But realistically, what you have on the right-hand side is the anode bias, and on the left-hand side, you have the cathode bias. Okay, and then you have the anodic energy, okay, actually traveling through and back, okay, the cathodic side, and vice versa. Now, when you do that, the whole reason in the first place is because when the energies are pulling toward each other, because they want to make that connection, they realize that they're the same thing when they're headed toward each other like that. Okay. So they deviate away from each other, they repel. Okay. And then they go make a collection. Okay. And they start to come back. And when they start to come back, okay, they're going to actually come into relationship with the other side heading the other way, the other way, meaning that now the attractive event occurs. So there's a repulsive event of the current, an exchange, an energy exchange, a return, where then when it returns and makes the contact. How does it happen? It happens all at a 45-degree angle. Okay. By the point of interaction. And once all those sides unify in that way, it creates a asymmetric energy exchange between the two sides that occur. Okay, that's at the point where it's not certain. We used to see Sean's thing and it would glow purple at the surface and the tendrils would be reaching around and reaching around. Well, it was making those first few loops that way, right, to get this feed going. Now, once this feed was established and the ratios were proper as far as what this asymmetric exchange is going to look like, that's when it grows and swoops. Okay, when it grows and swoops, why does it do that? It's because the energy went from this parallel relationship, where they were headed directly at each other like this, right, and next to each other, but heading opposite ways. Okay, to now being repelled and attracted. Well, once you repel and attract, they cross. The field lines cross. It creates an X, right? Well, but it's not really an X. It's dimensional, but it represented like that. Well, again, those field lines, they come from like this to like this. And once you bring those two in, it creates a third vector. That's the completion of the Rodin spiral, right? The Tesla 369 spiral.
Did you say the Rodin spiral?
That's what they call it, yeah.
Okay.
And when they cross, they create the 9 and the 4.5 that I always discuss, which collapses it from a 9 count to a 10 count, and you get your third pulse vector. And then you have a dimensional magnetic field at that point with asymmetric energy exchange and an energy bias on one side. All these things combined create a multiple field geometry that all work independently of one another. Okay, but in one part moves the next seamlessly. And that's where the RAV is able to sit there and separate its parts, the differentials, keep its differentials separated, but then have a controlled mix in the middle, okay, which is the self-organizing property of it. And through this, the resistance only really is occurring, once the torsion is formed. So once the interaction starts to grow, right, where the separated parts start to come together, they come together in such a way that there's boundaries, and we know that there's a certain amount of laminosity that occurs between the layers. But there's also speed difference as far as how fast, based on the geometries of rings building out and what it is, and that creates torsion between the layers. That torsion isn't necessarily resistance because one is driving the other, so it's not a loss. But that torsion is a twisting motion of all the high density energy in that area. What does that mean? Well, that means that it's fucking taking that stupid diagram that they show you of the Earth on some kind of rag, and the rag sagging down to the middle, and then they roll a marble, and they're like, there's your gravity. Well, you know what it does? It pulls that damn thing taut. That's what it does. So that whole entire thing is working off of much, much different environmental principles than we're experiencing externally.
I so hate that stupid thing. All right, Joe, here's the thing. Your angles are wrong. On the positive and negative, you got it at a 21-degree angle.
I didn't measure angles, man. This is a visual.
Huh. Let me show you something. Because other than that, it matched what you were doing. So
yeah, no, that was literally, I didn't measure angles or anything. I was just trying to show a representation of generally what's going on.
Oh, okay, because it looked like a donut. Me and donuts.
Bro, if we ever get together, one place I'm not taking you is Dunkin'. That's for damn sure.
So here's the actual RAV, and you see the field already. Just like Joe said, it builds out like this. And that's more of a, 50-degree angle, something like that. In this thing, it's almost a spherical structure, but it's an egg. And you can see it build out just like that. So what he's saying is right. The only part is in the exchange rate. See how the RAV builds out in this way? It blows out. Either sucking in or blowing out, you know what I mean? And you see the offset of the other side. So I just want to show that. But that is the exchange rate you were talking about that goes back and forth between the two. You know what I mean? So it'll create the figure eight between them if you really look at it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was it. By the way, I got to ask you a question, okay? You see that plasma right there, the pink one?
Mm-hmm.
If we couldn't see the field and it was just sitting there, okay, just like the satellite does with the RAV, would that be ball lightning? Now, let me say this as well. The only reason ball lightning moves around is it can be decoupled because it decoupled from this zone. Okay?
That's a good way to put it, by the way. It's decoupled is just another way to say out of phase. Out of phase is just another way to say exists primarily in an upper dimension. Okay.
Well, I don't think it says that. It's physical. You touch it, you know what I mean? It still zaps you, kills you.
Okay, hold on. But when I say things like that, I try to be super specific in choosing my words to say. As I said, primarily exists.
Primarily, okay.
Okay, of a higher dimensional geometry. Okay. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that a four-dimensional object, okay, can exist as a three-dimensional object in 3 dimensions. Okay. However, you never get to see its entirety. You only ever get to see a fragment of what it is, and that's the amount present in your dimensional reality. So, for instance, 4D objects, okay, are made up of basically 3D objects, okay? 3D objects are to the fourth dimension, okay, what cells are, let's just say, to us. Like, we're made up of all sorts of cells, and
Okay.
whatever. My point is this, okay? If a 4D object, let's say a 1 foot ball with a 1 foot diameter, okay, in 4D, were to enter into 3D space, okay, you would not see a 1 foot diameter ball. Okay, what you would see is as it starts to crest over our threshold, you would see a pinpoint, and as it began to come closer in, you would see an actual three-dimensional sphere, and it would grow. Okay, and as it hits the central axis point where the diameter is the greatest, you would see the largest representation of the sphere itself. But what's important to know is that even when you see the largest representation of the sphere itself, okay, all those other smaller geometries that you previously saw fell out of your face, okay? And they exist in the 4D. So the volume of it is far greater. It's orders of magnitude greater. That's the point, right?
Okay.
So, yeah, that's what the dimensionality of it has to do with, like, something like this,
Okay. I was just asking on the way people see things, okay? If I just came out and said I had a plasma ball, and I showed you the pink object, but I showed you no field around it, you'd probably say, wow, that's kind of like ball lightning sitting there. It's just basically plasma floating in the air.
Mhm.
And I would say, well, the satellite on the RAV is exactly that every single time.
Mhm.
It's a ball of energy that sits out there, and we don't see the dimensional plane it's sitting on. Okay?
I
That
agree with that. That's what I was saying. Why I went into that explanation, because the
okay, yeah.
behaviors that we see of ball lightning are reportedly exactly that: meandering, fluctuating in and out, growing and shrinking in size, not being bound to any single axis, and being apparently acting as if resistance is nothing to it. Well, that makes sense because resistance is nothing to it, because most of its structure is existing outside of the resistance that we experience.
Okay, so I guess what I'm saying is this is real simple. If you didn't see that sphere around it, you'd say that's probably ball lightning just sitting there. But if the charge continued to stay within it as you turned the RAV off and it moved around, because it's no longer coupled to that field, it would then meander around everywhere with no place to be because you turned off the energy, right? But it would still have enough energy to run the plasma until it died, right?
Mhm.
So that's the effect I think is really happening in ball lightning. There's so much charge. It puts so much energy in the ball. The fields are going so fast. It takes a couple minutes for them to discharge. Is what I'm saying. So that's all I was trying to make a point of here, Joe.
No, but that's a great point, and it brings me back to actually something that I haven't said in a long time, and it's something that just sounded so fucking crazy when I said it the first time. Right. And it was a question that I asked you. Remember, I said it's about asking right questions, even if they're weird. Ask them. And the question that I have is, when we turn the power off to the RAV, is it gone? Is it
Yeah.
gone? And I said, I don't know that it ever does, but I think that its frequency change, because you just turned off that energy, puts it out of phase. And then it just is still, it's just not present here anymore because it's not in phase with this dimension, and the way that I suppose this, okay, had to do with the conditioning of the materials. Okay, we knew that once we condition the materials to have the proper flow patterns, okay, the RAV would instantly form. Instantly. Okay, so there was a memory that existed because even though we created the conditions, that's cool and all, okay, but it should still have to build up the fields in order to work. But that's not what we observed. What we observed is you power it on and it kicks on when you start it on one of those black dots on the clay. You know, as soon as you hit a certain energy rate, certain frequency, it would come back immediately. And that's because you're bringing it back in phase. That's what's interesting. So it's sort of like you're creating something, okay, in a moment in time that is not subject to time or space as we know it, and is only conditionally present, basically summoning. You know, it's like you must have these conditions and then it is summoned. Well, when you're priming it before it forms and you're trying to get a new piece of material to have this clean exchange, you know, it literally is setting its conditions to be summoned and then you summon it. It's very strange when you think about it that way, but that's what it comes down to.
I don't think that's what's going on. I love the idea.
I was just saying,
I
ask
just
weird
don't.
questions. Ask
No,
weird
'cause
questions. That's it.
the frequency is so high at 99 to 100 kilohertz, we can't see the time it takes to build the field. Is what I that's my opinion. If it was in the hertz level where you could see it, and then it just automatically appeared, I would absolutely be on your side on that one.
Cool. The formation isn't in the hertz level, but the fucking thing itself is. You know,
Well,
so this is what you got to realize, and that's why I'm saying it has to do with phase. You know, you have to create
but
those
when Sean
conditions.
measured it, he measured it in kilohertz as the rotational rate.
Yeah, use the radio example though, man. Like, use the radio example. You know, if you tune into, you know, if you were in New York in 1997 and you tuned to 92.3, sure than hell K-Rock would come on and Howard Stern was probably on if it was the morning. Okay. If you changed the channel, well then Howard went away and you got another channel. Right.
Yeah,
But
that just has to do with the frequency.
okay, perfect. You're following me. So now, let's just say you didn't know that K-Rock and Howard Stern existed. Okay. Well, you're doing something, you're searching, you're setting a condition, you're looking for a placement on the dial, you're looking for, and then you discover it. Now you know where it exists. Now, you know, when you leave, you could bring it back. You see, because you've conditioned it, you know where it is, and once you put those specific conditions again, it comes back. Why? Because you've dialed in that frequency. You've had the same conditions. You provided these multitude of interactive events and frequencies that occur that on that one condition spot, okay, culminate in a stable and repeatable outcome that tune that energy, okay? Tune that energy in. Tune it in. And that's what I'm saying. Again, is it a weird proposition? Yeah. But is the RAV weird? Yeah.
But hold on. This is the cathode right here being set. This is the condition being set. So yeah, it'll summon back the right frequency. You're putting in the same power.
Summon back the right frequency. That's what I'm saying.
But that's setting the cathode. It's setting the condition for the frequency. It doesn't make it appear out of 4D or out of 6D. It sets the condition for the energy to create the same frequency.
Right. except for the fact that if you believe that there's time dilation occurring, okay, its timeline is different than ours. And if we suppose that it moves slower, yet it instantly disappears when we power it off, how would you suppose that it's gone?
Okay, I was trying to answer that. It's building in kilohertz. But if we're on the other side of the field and we're in hertz, we would see the difference. The problem is we don't have the time dilation field built. You know what I mean? We can't see what's going on there. So
Exactly. Because
it's
why?
but it,
Because
no
when
no
we
but
power it off, it goes out of phase. That's the point. You
I don't
see?
think it goes out of phase. I think it dies, and it dies fast. What I'm saying is we don't have the ability to slow down the time. The camera would slow down the time and would be able to see it build as a normal reaction.
See, like, okay, let's go metaphysical with this for a second. You know, you are a human being, right? And those are your conditions set. See, your conditions are set, okay, as long as the conditions of your existence are met. Once the conditions of your existence are no longer met, aka your biological systems, the ability to eat, sleep, drink, poop, etc., right? Once one of those things goes out of whack and you cease to exist, right? Well, your physicality goes into a state of decay. Now, if you're a believing person that there's something more than this, or that consciousness may not exist physically inside of a chemical condition inside of your body, right? Your three-dimensional conditions of existence and phase have now ceased to exist. And whatever it was that you believe occurs after you die, okay, your consciousness now shifts into that phase because it is now out of phase with the body that it originally had the communication with or the attachment with. Okay, so but what does that mean? Well, what that means is that, well, okay, you're gone, right? You're gone, but that's still there. See what I mean? What makes this any different? It's just energy existing in an organized state in 3 dimensions under certain conditions under a specific phase. And, again, if it immediately popped up before it set its conditions, okay, then none of this would make sense or matter. But the fact is that the conditions have to be set, and once established, there's a memory of this. Okay, and if you repeat it where the memory exists, it summons it back.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what I'm saying. I know it's metaphysical, and I know it sounds
No.
but it's like
let me go through it. I get what you're saying. The problem is with the RAV is it immediately turns on when it's in use for a long time. As soon as you wait a couple hours, it doesn't do that. It takes a while to form again. So it's not instantaneous coming back. It is when you continue to use it and the air around it is set the condition. But once that air no longer has that condition, it then takes a while to reform again. Okay.
I mean,
So,
that wasn't my experience with it with the rock.
well, that was mine.
Because I had to sit there and blast my surface, in order to get my conditions set in the first place. But what's weird is that I left it for a month or two before I ran it again when I blew a circuit, and I was waiting for more to come, and I was looking to figure it out. And it fired right up on that spot. Now, as soon as I moved it, it was back to the same old search and grab bullshit because it wasn't on that state of conditions. It just sets the conditions there and those conditions bring something back into phase, and that
Well, I'm not
what that
disputing
is.
that. I'm just
Yeah.
saying I don't think it goes into the right. Well, you keep saying phase. I don't think that it's a phase. I think it creates the same condition. It creates the same energy and the same pathways. I don't think it goes between 4 and 3 dimensions. Not right there.
I don't know. I actually think that all energy, all everything that you consider energy, I don't believe that it's native to 3D. None of it. That's why you don't, in the vacuum of space, okay, it's why you don't see the electromagnetic functions, okay, of any sort of energy, perturbation or uh, transient energy, propagation, or anything. It's why you don't see any electromagnetic effects occur three-dimensionally what in the absence of matter, because the only thing that leads to that manifestation, okay, of any energy at all, is its interaction with matter. That's it. Not light, not current, not magnetism, not anything, not sound, there's not one thing you could say that would be even possibly conceived as a transient energy that is not that is manifest in a vacuum, which means that it is pushing something somewhere. And guess what? It ain't fucking here. All right. It's on the other side of the veil. All right. Now,
But
as soon as the matter is in its path, okay, this creates a resistance, because what do we know about higher dimensions? They are made up of lower dimensions. That's it. That's how it goes. So once you have the matter interaction, it creates resistance. This resistance manifests itself as energy, manifest energy, in some sort of state of energy or electromagnetism. Okay. And it goes somewhere while it's transient, and it's not here. And that's the point. And anytime that they say, well, you have these small vacuum fluctuations that occur where energy will just pop up randomly, well, those are literal cavitative events that have conditions which make that occur. Okay, because there's so many fluctuations around. See, there's material and electromagnetic fluctuations all over, and as soon as enough of this occurs, there you go. But if you take a form of energy propagation and you have multiple propagations and they're going to intersect and interact, we know what that does, right? But you don't see the result of it unless if it interacts with matter. You see? So that intersection, that whole event that occurred, where did it occur and of what? Well, fact
okay.
is that we know that these extra geometries, these extra motion, these extra dimensional motions, therefore spaces beyond time, space, and time as we know it, exist. And that's what's interesting. It's not subject to our time. We're subject to its time. Its torsion on us is mechanism of our time. That exchange rate that occurs, okay, is the mechanism of how we experience time. Okay, because as soon as it enters in and it hits resistance, we know that the resistance is directly correlated with torsion. We know that torsion is directly correlated with gravity and time, and that we know that all these things only occur, okay, if electromagnetic energy or energy in general is manifest, and it's only manifest in the presence of matter. So, do you see what I'm saying? So these waves, they go somewhere until they are interacted with, and then they're here. But while that's happening, they're not here.
Okay.
You know, if there's no
Hold on.
dust or moisture in the air, you don't see the flashlight in between where you shine it and what it shines on if you have nice clean air.
Okay, hold on. I get what you're saying. I also understand that our optics, our eyeballs, cannot pick up these fields. Okay, but there are things that you can do, like blue glass, Egyptian blue glass, something like that, where you can start to see magnetic fields. Now, are you saying that that field is out of a dimension that we basically can see it because we change our light spectrum in order to see it? So it's a different dimension?
Yeah,
But hold
that is
on.
what I'm saying. Yes,
But we're still interacting with it,
correct,
regardless.
correct. And now see my ball example. Okay, it is here, but we are part of what we are in.
But when you
Part
keep
of
saying
this.
dimension, you're saying disappearing. And it's not disappearing, it's just we can't see it.
Wow,
It's still there.
still there.
It's still there. It still can be interacted with. It's out of our spectrum of seeing it.
You're picking it up, right? It's still there. It's just not here. You see,
But it is
well,
here.
well, no, not necessarily.
Then we're talking two different issues here.
Right, right. It's not necessarily here. Its potential and its memory is here. And if the conditions are set to that where that memory lies, then it's restored. It's like a computer, right? Well, you could digitally store information. Okay, cool. So it's a bunch of numbers, whatever. But it's sitting there stored electronically, first of all. Okay, and doing nothing until you access it. And then once your operating system has set the conditions, okay, and then access the memory, then it reappears. That's the thing. So the weird thing about it is that it didn't exist until you created it. But if you're going to create it using the same material, for instance, right, that you're creating it before, once again, recreating it, you're not actually creating it again. You're just bringing it back. Again, it's nuanced and it's a little woo 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 woo, but you know, like let's let's be straight. That's the situation at hand. And does it okay? And then the question can arise: can it lose memory over time? I mean, well, I suppose it could, and you know, maybe that's easily a reason why the conditions then change because they're subject to a 3D environment, right, which is in constant state of fluctuation. Those, if that memory and those conditions change, then it's not a matter of summoning it back. It has to reestablish the conditions to then be created again, and that's sort of what it is. It's like it's incubus, not incubus, a system of a down. Life is a waterfall. You're one with the river and one again after the fall. It's that deal. You see, it goes back to the sea of potential, but there's a memory of it. You bring the conditions back, it comes back. It kind of
Okay.
sounds a little necromantic, but
Yeah.
whatever.
When we're setting the cathode, though, we're creating a carbon which could be graphene. And as soon as you do that, it has the potential to store memory. But that
Yep.
doesn't mean that it goes out of phase. It means it'll start fast. It'll be just about immediate, but it doesn't mean that it's out of phase and stays there.
Well, if your senses are only capable of picking up, like, this much of any given spectrum, right? And then there's this whole entire other spectrum that exists outside of it, right? It needs to be within your conditions or your instrument's conditions, which are still this, okay, in order to pick it up. So when you power it down and it meets the resistance, the conditions are no longer met, the frequency changes. And once it falls outside of your very narrow scope of ability to perceive, you can no longer perceive it, but that doesn't mean it doesn't still exist. It like I said, it sounds philosophical, it sounds woo-woo, but what am I saying that's breaking science? Because nothing. It changes frequency, yeah, reduces frequency greatly and immediately. You're only capable of sensing, and 3 dimensions is only capable of holding a certain tune, a certain tuning, right? And once you change that dial and it falls outside of that dimensional tuning or your senses tuning, or, well, then it's not there. It can't interact with you because it's outside of the scope of the parameters. It's outside of the conditions.
I'll be honest with you, man. I heard what is it, Ralph Ring talk about the same thing with the OTCX1. I find it interesting, Joe. I don't know that I'm there yet with the RAV. Okay, I I just
Well,
see it a little differently. But with other things, like when you're talking about high frequency things and things, that, yeah, maybe.
well, for what it's worth, anytime you power something down, it meets resistance, changes frequency. It goes back to the same place with the nuanced difference. Okay, and I'm sure that's a lot easier to digest because we just say it goes back into a state of potential. That's what we say. It's undetectable, but you can't destroy the energy. So it goes somewhere. It's not wasted, and it will interact when conditions arise. Okay. The only thing is that its conditions, okay, are not multi-vector emulations. Okay. And they are not burning a memory into anything necessarily, right? So when you talk about the RAV or you talk about consciousness, something that is emergent and developed and coherent, okay, it's coherence and right, that is what's required to set a memory condition. Once you have a memory set condition, okay, then it's again that memory, as long as that memory lasts, okay, can be summoned back if the conditions are met. That's all. That's all I'm saying. It all goes back to the same place, though, the place of what we would just call potential.
Yeah, I
You
get
know,
it.
uh,
It makes more sense when you start talking about the soul or something like that, or the energy in your body, the light body. That all makes more sense to me than in that way
well,
than
okay.
it
When you
does
turn
in
off
the
the
RAV.
Tesla coil, what happens to that field
It
over
collapses
time?
over time.
Right. So as the frequency of it changes and drifts further and further away outside of our spectrum and conditions of our dimension, it diffuses into a lower state, undetectable, and back into a state of potential. Right?
Okay.
So all I'm saying about this is the only difference being what did the Tesla coil in that example etch its memory to? Probably nothing, because it was only magnetism, and radiant energy, you know. So it didn't have this cyclical. In order for a memory to occur, okay, you must have the same bit pass, okay, and then be recycled through. You have to, because what constitutes a memory in the first place is your ability to reflect on it. If you've diffused out after an occurrence, you never get to look back, okay? Which means that the only conditions that memory can be stored, okay, is if it fully cycles through, okay? Well, and under those conditions, nothing's fully cycling through because everything is pushing off of the matter and diffusing out or cycling in on itself because of the matter. What this is doing is utilizing the matter, you know? It's in direct interaction with. It's tearing it apart. It's restructuring it. It's reforming it. It's bringing
Okay,
the
so
same bit of energy through the same
hold on.
central point.
Let's disperse with the fields of energy and go with the matter. If I put a ball in my hand, will it go out of phase and still be there? Or is it a strictly an energy thing?
It's no. I mean, nothing is exempt from this. If the frequency of something drops, it either goes too high or too low, which the measure of what constitutes too high or too low is the Planck scale. Okay. If it goes off that scale, it ceases to exist. That's it. Like it, but I say that it ceases to exist. But again, as see what I've just spent the last half an hour going over, it actually doesn't cease to exist, but three-dimensionally it does. So it'll go away, and you'll be like, man, that's gone. But the fact is that its frequency just either went too high or low. That's it.
I don't know that a frequency change would do that. It would have to be an energy phase change.
Of course, a frequency change would do that.
No, it wouldn't. Because you could adjust the frequency of the rev. You can adjust frequency and things.
To zero or near zero or below the Planck scale?
Well, you just turn it off.
Right. Cool. Exactly. You got it.
No, I don't got it because it doesn't work that way. I turn shit off on here all the time and it doesn't disappear on me.
Well, you remember what we were discussing before about you're like, this magnet is fixed. And I'm like,
yeah, but the way you're saying it is if I go over the light switch, I can turn off my house.
Yeah, I mean, what everything is doing, if something stops, if something's frequency that its makeup, drops to a certain level, it ceases to exist. And when you start to look at superconductivity in hyperchill situations, you quickly realize, okay, how the existence and physics of things, okay, at low frequency, at reduced frequency levels, okay, it all starts to break because of the same exact thing. Now, they say, well, that's absolute zero or whatever, right? And that's as cold as it gets, absolute zero. Well, if you got something to absolute zero, what is deterministic of that? That is the threshold. You see, because if something is absolute zero and it's matter, it stops moving. When it stops, as far as we can perceive, once it stops moving, it ceases to exist. It's not frozen and it's not fucking frozen or something.
Okay, hold on.
The
only way you could do it is on the atomic level. You can't do it by turning things on and off. In the atomic level, you can disperse the atom. Okay? Then things have no basis in matter anymore. They turn to energy. That can happen, but not on a spark gap
let me
or
ask you
rev
this.
or anything like that. It doesn't work
I'm gonna destroy your mind. All right. Why does matter exist in like that? It has a memory. It has conditions. What is that? That's the structure, the lattice structure of the molecules. That is the memory. So those conditions, okay, are frozen as far as we're concerned. And as long as nothing changes those conditions, it'll always exist. But as we well know about things that are material just generally, there's all sorts of things that always change those conditions. And it leads to changes in the material itself over time. Now, that's just in the natural, and
That's changing the
that's just
atomic
part of the
structure, Joe.
right.
That's
So,
but
so what
that's
happens?
that's not turning off a switch.
Yeah. Okay.
You have
Yeah.
to change the
You don't
atomic
have to follow.
structure.
It's okay. We're believed in that. It's like I said though. It just becomes very counterintuitive. Okay. When and and I'm not calling you hypocritical, but it's a it's a hypocritical thought to believe that certain things happen and that's cool because I'll accept that and we know that. But that what I'm saying here, when it comes to memory and conditions, okay, and phase, that it doesn't exist here, but it exists elsewhere. The
No,
key is
but
the memory and the conditions.
it's not that, Joe. I didn't break the energy inside the atom. Is the problem? It I still left physical structure there. I did not bring it to a true energy state to reduce it to zero. I have still numbers on the table as long as I have atoms. What I'm saying is once you break the atom down, then you can get to a true zero. Then what you're saying could happen. I'm saying that the atomic structure has to be broken in order to get what you want. It has to be separated in some way. It cannot be in the state that it's in now. Therefore, when you have an anode and cathode, that still has structure.
So
It,
the breaking would just simply occur by the simultaneous frequency reduction. That's it. Like if you had a basketball and it dropped below our threshold of its frequency, the entire lattice would fall apart and then cease to exist on the molecular level, and it would. That's exactly how it would go.
that's what I
And
just
frankly,
said.
it's possibly something that happens as well. Like when you know, uh, like a nuclear explosion or something like that. Like if you're a human being in that area or something, like it's quite possible that you cross thresholds of frequency because of the amount of heat, pressure, etc. differential. If it were to throw you off the scale, well, you might not exist here, but like your
Okay,
physicality could possibly be like atomized somewhere else.
what I'm saying is turning off a switch is not the same as making a transporter. What you're saying would make a transporter possible. That I can take you down to the atomic level and beyond, and then rebuild you 100% on the other side where I put the wire out or I put the beam out or whatever it is,
Right.
which would make sense. But if you don't destroy the atomic structure, it stays in its atomic form. Whatever that structure is created, it stays. That's what I'm
Right.
saying.
Right.
So
So
that's why I'm asking
that's
you.
actually perfect. That's actually perfect because again, I said that there's two components. The components are a memory,
Yeah,
okay,
we agree.
and conditions. So if you have the memory of what it was, and the conditions are then met, then existence is will occur. Okay. And ironically, and this is weird, right? But like what if you just like live your life, okay, and nobody knows you have no childhood memories, you were abandoned, you raised yourself, you went out into the woods, you lived and died there, nobody ever discovered you, nobody ever knew you, nobody has any memory of you, did you ever exist?
Yes.
Well, okay, but nobody recalls. So the whole point is that like this is the idea behind tombstones and genealogy and things of that nature is trying to preserve something about an individual that there's even a retrospective recollection and remembrance, and something like that is enough potentially, okay, of a memory that that their spirit is still quasi related to this world. So what
My
keeps somebody from
granddaughter
going
watching a
back?
movie, Joe. Hold on, my granddaughter watching a movie called Coco.
Uh-huh.
It deals with the
I
same
know.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Right, and it's the same. But you have to realize that we always talk about these ancient practices and how the meaning of it all got lost to time and all this. But the whole entire reason that they have these memorials and people keep these records is that that's the difference between you energetically as an individual and any relationship to this dimension, or just being back in the pool. Once you're forgotten, you're just back in the pool, you know. And I don't know, that's just how it is. Yeah.
So hold on. I had a question for you. If we say it's like a transporter, right?
Mhm.
Is going through time like a transporter?
I mean, pretty much.
I mean, you just dissolve and then you reappear in a different time field or time zone.
The funny thing about the dissolution part of it is that it only appears three-dimensionally that we are dissolving, right? So you got to realize that we are present in upper dimensions as part of that already. So you're not, you're not really disappearing. Okay, you're just gaining temporary access where your oscillatory phase, right, actually gains access to yourself there in the higher dimension. You see, there's physicality there. It's not that there's not. It's just one component, one geometry. I'm not saying it looks the same or it is the same or this, that. The point is that right now, if you're experiencing time, okay, there is a part, all of you, okay, is part of some four-dimensional structure that exists and can be observed in that dimension and above. Now, what becomes interesting about it is that you don't only exist necessarily in one circumstance when you're there. Okay, so you would exit here and enter into the part of you that stopped at that moment. Okay, but there's actually a whole bunch of other of you, kind of, so to speak, okay, that's impressed into the memory of that occurred, because time is different, runs at a different rate, and there's simultaneous things there's things happening simultaneously, okay, where it might stretch like I don't know what a window might look like based on the difference, but let's say that you could actually see yourself doing all sorts of various things over the last year. You see what I mean? And then you have all this other shit in front of you, plus all these other places, because now all of a sudden your 3D world, okay, is just a small part of
So,
the actual
so,
makeup. So your expanse. So you actually are not subject to time and space the same. So you could go here then.
so hold
You
on.
know,
So my 4D body is going to be watching my 3D body scratch its balls for an hour. That's basically what you're saying. I'm going to go back in time and watch me just do that for hours at a time.
actually, the funny thing about it, okay, is that the fourth dimensional could probably greatly influence you, okay, but you don't so much influence it because of where your consciousness is tied. So what's weird about it is that actually you have all these versions of yourself going on simultaneously there, right, through a span of
Oh, I
time,
get a lot of people
probably past
yelling at
and
me.
future. Okay, but only, but you wouldn't necessarily even perceive it that way unless if you were there, okay? Because the part of you that did that, it's like just simply going about its business of what it did. You see,
Uh-huh.
because right, or what it's going to do. It's just going about its business, totally oblivious to the shit going on where you are now. Okay,
So
you're the observer from that perspective. So
there could be 20
you
of
have
me in my room right now and I wouldn't know it.
Right, exactly. Right. Would be none the wiser. So it's just literally like it would look like a. You know what it would look like when you look at like something microscopic under a microscope. It has no fucking idea you exist. It has no fucking idea that you're looking at it and observing it. It's just going about its damn business. You know what I mean? And that's exactly it. And more interestingly, most of those smaller structures, right, they're like clear and you could like see into them and see exactly what they are and made of. By the way, when you're in fourth dimension, you see the inside and out of people or things. Okay.
Oh,
The
that's
inside and
weird.
out are the same. Okay. But it's a matter of perspective. Okay. You're incapable of conceiving what something like that may be in this moment.
So
Okay.
I'm
But
worse than naked sitting on the chair. I'm visibly see through as I'm sitting there.
right. The
Okay.
same, right. Exactly. And the same way that, like, if you were to draw a square, right, on a piece of paper and that's two-dimensional, well, if you were a dot on the same paper as the square, all you would see is the edges of the square. You'd have no idea what's beyond the lines of the square. You'd never be able to see over that wall what's inside, right? But as a three-dimensional, you would think it's just solid through and through. But as a three-dimensional person looking at that situation, we clearly see that it's a dot, and then there's like a line, and then just in the inside is whatever's inside, nothing or something or whatever, you know, like we could see it all at the same exact time. It would be a very similar circumstance to that, you know. Yeah, it's interesting stuff, like I said. But if you believe that stuff, if you believe that energy can't be destroyed, but you also know that energy will drop off the map and go silent, but also then reoccur, okay, at certain other points in time and space, okay. Well, then you already understand, believe, and know exactly what I'm saying. You know, the idea is that it happened and it's transient and it's there and it won't come back till it interacts.
It's just a hard leap to make until you see it. Then after that, it wouldn't be hard at all.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of a weird thing too. It's like, could you imagine like a ghost, right? Well, if you're a ghost and you're just going around, you're never detected by anybody, you could just go back and then there's nothing, whatever. But let me ask you, have you ever noticed how certain places just seem haunted as shit? And they're like, oh, and this person, people have seen him, they've seen what he's done, they've seen whatever. Well, guess what? Bro came back and established a memory of himself and an identity. Now, if certain conditions are met, he could just come back as he freely feels, so to speak. Like, you know, he could actually be called back because you could meet those same conditions of the memory that exists here. It's craziness. It sounds crazy, but this is like, this isn't even me talking. This is physics.
No,
You know?
there's going to be a lot of cowboys at the strip club. That's all I'm going to say. Okay. They're going to put
Sounds
their
a little
memory
gay,
there.
Sounds a little gay.
They're all going to remember the good time they had, not all the bad times.
Mhm.
So they put their memory out. It's hilarious.
Well, memory imprinting. You remember the story I told about the razor?
Yeah.
There's a memory imprint, on that object.
I better start imprinting things on my stuff so I can come back.
Now, the conditions that I met was probably just like caring about it, you know what I mean? Like thinking it's nice, cleaning it up, taking care of it.
Like a
Once
strip
I met,
club.
right. So once the memory was imprinted on the thing and the conditions were met, all of a sudden, bro was sucked out of wherever the fuck he was and was like, "Who dare disturbs my gay kissing?" You know what I mean? For anybody that watches Al Barry out there, you know what I'm talking
Who's rubbing my blade?
about.
Oh, that's hilarious, Joe. Yeah, I think it's a pretty interesting conversation, man. I totally into it. It's hard to make the leap, but I think you and Aether are probably on the same level with that one. You guys keep getting me with it.
It's like however strange reality actually seems, it's way weirder. And this is how scientists like have been pigeonholed, unfortunately, and I hate to say it, but it's true. But science not only predicts, but confirms everything that I just said, except as applied. All right. Someone along the line decided that you could apply it to whatever you want, but if you start applying it to stuff that seems either spectacular or magical or religious or whatever, well, now you're out of your lane, and somebody along the way decided that it's probably the Vatican. To be real, probably the Vatican. But
oh man, yeah, right here. Value also does not mean money. Also for charity. Well, that's what Jesus believed, right? He'd rather have your companionship and friendship throughout his journey than he would any piece of gold or anything you had on you. So, absolutely right. At least that's the way I see it. So, all right, Joe, it's been like 3.5 hours, bro. I need to get something to eat.
It's a good one.
Yeah, I know it was a really good show today, man. So
right on.
Yeah. All right, guys, I want to thank real quick Ulysses out there, man. Awesome, brother. 5 Old Men's Build membership.
Love that, man. Thank you.
I'll be over with Traveling Fools tonight, man, at 7 o'clock, or 7:30 Pacific Standard Time. I think it's 9 o'clock on East Coast or something like that. Dude, last time I did the lab over there, Joe, dude, I sent you the video. It's hilarious, bro.
Yeah.
I was cutting melons and stuff in there, man, and I put I put little tassels on them, man. I went like this to him. Oh, dude, it was hilarious. If you didn't catch it last week, you should have. It was great.
Yeah, I'll have to do a watch back. Yeah, because it went a little long, and I've been busy all week, so I'll have to catch up.
Yeah, just watch the first part of it, dude. You'll laugh your butt off because I'm over there cracking jokes, dude, while I'm zapping myself. It was awesome. And then, guys, Mike on Faraday's channel in about 30 minutes will go live on Faraday Research. And I believe BurnEye will be over there, and Mike. I might pop over there depending if I can get something to eat fast enough before my other show. So, anyway.
Right on. Also, don't forget to visit Old Man's Shopify, where you can buy Tesla Coils t-shirts, my artwork, and you could make Nathan and I, rich as pig and shit, and we could just roll around in it and literally be like, whoa, the fucking peasants who fueled our wealth and richness and whatever.
I don't think that'll ever happen, Joe. I've been poor my whole life. It's going to continue to be that way.
I don't know. Apparently, I said that's what we were doing, so I figured I might as well just keep up with that.
No, whatever. Oh, that's so great. All right, guys.
There's no offense, by the way, to High Sciences. He's a good guy.
Yeah. Well, I thought he was. I didn't have any problem with what he says. So he brought it up, man. You guys got it out. I'm good. As long as you guys figured it out.
Right on.
All right, guys. Have a great night.
Peace and love. Have a good weekend.
The old man will. The old man will. The old man will. The old man builds. The old man builds is broken in the head. People not seeing reality has put them in the red. Where conscious and spirituality been stricken from the norm and replaced with the ignorance of basic magnetic form. The geometry of God keeps running through his head. That's what makes old man builds broken in the head. The old man builds. The old man builds. Spheres of destiny are spinning in his mind, making him travel back and forth in time, battling the establishment for just a little recognition. Has him forcing the world to understand his premonition. That world will have all the technology in the end, even if it means his life will fail to instead. The old man builds. The old man builds. The old man builds. The old man builds. Fears of destiny are spinning in his mind, making him travel back and forth in time, battling the establishment for just a little recognition, has him forcing the world to understand his premonition, that we're